All right, Kingkillers, we're covering chapters 123 to 124 in this episode. We started out originally by talking about the tournament that we ran on Twitter for fantasy duos, but that has already ended and it's not really relevant at this point. So I went ahead and cut that out of the episode, and we just jumped straight into the chapters. So we're covering the chapter where Kvothe does his test with the sword tree. And then also he goes and gets his name, Maedra, from the Adem in this episode. So sit back and enjoy. All right, welcome back to the Kingkiller podcast. I'm Dan. Got with me Tim. What's going on?
I am here. Hello, guys. Hello, everybody.
All right, so we're going to be covering chapter 123, The Spinning Leaf. And in this chapter, Kvothe starts his test at the sword tree, and he goes down there, ends up blowing their nips off.
Yeah, they're definitely blown away. He does. This is definitely one of the more memorable parts of the books. As I always think back to it, it's fucking the way Rothfuss writes it is just it's so tremendous in terms of, you know, again, the way it builds up, plays out. I love Kvothe's like knee-jerk reaction. It's a lot of nervousness and like pensive, and he goes through tons of emotional arcs just within the chapter in itself.
I like the whole chapter to begin with, but you know, in the beginning where he's like, you know, the next morning Vashette came to collect me just as I was finishing breakfast. She said, Kvothe has been praying for a storm all night, but it's only gusting. And he's like, I didn't know what that meant, but I didn't feel like asking either. I returned my wooden plate and turned around to find Kvothe standing there, a slight yellowish bruise along her jawline. Love that aspect of he makes a point on this part, the fact that Kvothe got a bruise along her jawline, and then when he sees Kvothe later on, when he has to fight her for that part of the test after he gets invited into the school and he's got to go to the first stone and he has to fight Kvothe after he talks about his sword, and then he has to fight her, and they're going to see what kind of place he would start in at the school. When he fights her, he sees that Kvothe's eyes all blacked up. And so, you know, they reinforce that Kvothe and Kvothe got into a little bit of fisticuffs with each other.
Over good old Kvothe.
Yeah.
The redheaded wonder here.
Yeah, Kvothe all about that ginger. Yeah, she wants that fire, man.
Yeah. She wants that anger, right? He has a delicious anger or whatever.
I love too, like, you know, when that part comes up, like she's not willing to do it until he gets into the school and he's no longer a barbarian. It's like he mentions that where she's like, no, none of us would have sex with a barbarian. He's like, oh, yeah. And she's like, well, no, you're not a barbarian anymore. It's like, I expect there's going to be a bunch of people coming after you.
Well, I guess Vashette had lower standards then.
Yeah.
But we do find out she basically
Vashette's more worldly. Like. She's been out in the world.
Yeah, that's
and
right.
She's been around a barbarian a time or two.
Yeah, she turned a poet king basically.
Yeah.
To realize the right way of things, which is really really funny to me. It's like he finally realized. Like, it's very they're very set in their way. I mean, obviously, very set in their ways with how right they are about the ways to look at the world. Of course, everybody's like that, but
to the point where, I mean, they completely disrespect the other societies, but they do it in a way where they don't even realize how condescending they're being.
Yeah.
But they are like over the top condescending sometimes, where it's just like, oh, well, I mean, it's not your fault you're an idiot. It's not your fault. You're just really stupid and you think really stupid things. But I don't blame you. You're just a really stupid barbarian.
Well, and that's hilarious too, because she even says it about a king, Where she's like, oh yeah, he used to be stupid like you too, until he came to the right way of things.
Like, I don't even know if she says he came to the right way of things. She's just more like, I've had these arguments before with my Poet King, and I don't want to have them again.
Well, in my mind, I'm wondering if he just relented after a while. He's like, yeah, okay, you're right. Or like she like fucked it out of him, basically.
I don't know that she could make me accept that, there's nothing amiss about just sleeping with as many people as you want, and there's no emotional tie to it at all, really. It's just sex. Like, to an extent, maybe I can see that there are times where it can be fun, and there's that aspect of it, but like where it's just like that's just what we do, like everybody. Like, no, I'm still gonna have some standards, and there's still gonna be some emotional attachment to it at times, at least.
Well, that's one of the interesting things about it, where they talk about intimacy. She's like, well, of course it's intimate. Who said it wasn't? Like, she's kind of on that line of like, of course it's intimate,
but it's less intimate than teaching.
Yeah, but yeah, where it's intimate, but not with like feelings. Yeah. Like, it's intimate being close, and you should be, I guess, they don't even put words to it, to where it's like, I guess, attracted or whatever.
It's that idea, like, I don't own your sex. Like, yeah, I don't own my girlfriend, but I would be upset if I'm dating a girl and she slept with somebody else.
Yeah.
It would feel like a betrayal. It's not because I own her sex. Yeah. It's because there's other context to a relationship. Besides ownership.
Not just upset to the point of, I can't do this anymore. Yeah. Upset to the point of absolute betrayal, where now I can't trust you, and my whole world's crashing down.
There's a massive difference too in their society, in the fact that they don't believe that men have anything to do with pregnancy, and it could be the case that men don't have anything to do with pregnancy in their gene pool. Like, maybe they're physically different than we are as human beings. Maybe their biology is completely different. Where men, they do all have immaculate conceptions. That would dramatically change things, because there's a major event, as far as potential event, when you have sex with someone, in the fact that you could create another human being with them.
That is a mixture of the two of you.
Yeah.
And not only that, if that is actually the case, that changes the world of these books in a massive way, from my mind.
Yeah.
I mean, in a huge way. So I mean, yeah, that's a mind trip.
But it could be. I mean, like, there's like Bast is a satyr. He's walking around with goat legs, and he's basically like a goat from the waist down. And so it could be that the Adem are former Ruach, and maybe they were biologically different, and they're not the same. It's not the same evolution for them as it is for other humans. I don't think that's the case. I just think they're wrong, but it could be. I mean, it's a magical world.
It's really interesting. Yeah, they're so idealized, right? They have this. They stick to their ideals, and it really runs everything in their world. And then, yeah, when it comes to sex, it's funny, because it's a weird mix where it's like they're so idealistic, and then with this, it's like no big deal. It's
and
like doing a push-up.
And it's hard for like Kvothe to try to prove the argument, because you don't have like DNA, and so you don't have you don't have the scientific methods to be able to prove it more concretely than
they're basically depending on eye color and hair color.
Yeah, intuition. Like, you can kind of put two and two together and figure it out. It's kind of preposterous, though, that they wouldn't be able to figure it out over thousands of years, to the point where, like, they just completely dismiss it. At some point, you would think you would start putting two and two together.
Yeah.
I don't know of any other society that doesn't understand where babies come from. I think that is pretty universal, that everybody figures that out.
Yeah, do they not have storks in this world?
Yeah, exactly. That's where babies come from.
They don't, so maybe they don't. Maybe they don't have storks, and that's why.
Yeah. Yeah, you pee on a girl's leg, a stork brings you a baby. That's why girls get really mad if you pee on their leg in a shower.
Yeah, that's why.
Yeah.
That's the reason.
Yeah.
It's one of my favorite things. It's one of my favorite pastimes. Gotcha.
Is that water getting warm? Guys are gross.
Yep.
But yeah, and so they go down, and Bichette takes them down, and she lets them know that the test is going to be at the sword tree. It's like Bichette walked me to the tiny park where we had first met and began our usual limbering stretch. The routine of it relaxed me, lulling my anxiety to a dull rumble. When we finished, Bichette led me down into the hidden valley of the sword tree. I wasn't surprised. Where else would the test take place? He finds out that the test is going to be at the sword tree. He sees that there's a big crowd, bunch of people in red, sees other people that he figured were more important members of the community, and eventually finds out that there are other leaders like Cheyenne.
Yeah, but he pulled a crowd. He pulled a crowd, man. Like, he really brought him in.
Yeah, and it sounds like Kvothe kind of spread the word and spiked his wheel a little bit.
She's the hem of this place, man.
Oh, big time. Yeah.
She gave him a stage, she gave him a huge audience, and he fucking hit a home run, a grand slam, basically in front of everybody.
Yeah, he definitely made sure that there was another, like an Ambrose or a him, someone trying to spike his wheel at all times in this group. And yeah, she is unlikable from start to finish. Completely unlikable.
It's interesting, though, because she has a little bit, for me at least, she has a little bit less of a face, a little bit less of a presence than him. But also she has more justification, at least, to be a prick, while him is just a prick, period, from get-go. You know what I mean? Like, it seems to me he's a prick to everybody. Everybody that walks in his class, they're all pieces of shit until they prove differently. And even then, I don't know if he's a nice guy to any of them, except Brandor. People that just lick his freaking his presence or whatever, just completely support him altogether. But with Kvothe, it's just outsiders. Yeah, she's locals only, right?
Yeah,
she's very much locals only.
Yeah. Yeah, she's she's unlikable. But yeah, and he goes, it was, as she had said, a rather blustery day, and the branches lashed wildly at the empty air. Then I saw a glint of metal against its trunk. Looking more closely, I could see a sword there, tied to the trunk of the tree. I thought Celine dancing around sharp leaves slapped the trunk of the tree. Of course. He realizes, sees that they got a bunch of things lined up around the tree, and Bichette tells him, you're going to have to go down there, grab something, and bring it back. And that's the point where he's like, hold on, this is the test? It's like, why did you not tell me? I would have had so much time to prepare for this. Yeah. I could have been practicing this. Like, this seems important to practice.
That's a great moment, because that's kind of like dude, what the fuck, man? Like, why didn't you help me? And then she's like, you never asked, which I love that attitude. Oh, you should have asked a very specific question that you had no real reason.
You would think that he would have asked, what's the test?
Yeah.
You would think that would come up. Like, so if I got to pass a test, what's the test?
Well, what I also really like about it, how it plays into the rolling motif we've had throughout the books, is like, yeah, I would have, she considered it, but then she considered he'd be out there hurting himself.
Yeah.
And then also, as what we know about Kvothe, when he has a lot of time to prepare and think things out, yeah, he might do well. Other times, he might overthink things, right? Yeah. And not allow his sleeping mind to take over, which in this case, it's really interesting how that spinning leaf comes on, because he doesn't put himself into it.
Yeah.
The tree conjures it out of him, which says a lot about this world, like you've been talking about, how the wind's always active. And I mean, it's very much what Elodin hinted. You're going to find, you need to look for out there in the world. He definitely found it here because it pulled it out of him and put him into it. Really interesting how that happened.
Yeah, and so like, and when she's talking about like you never asked, had he asked, she wouldn't have told him because she just admits like, she didn't think he was ready, and
Yeah.
so she didn't want him out there hurting himself. So had he asked, she would have been like, "You're not ready. I'll tell you when you're ready."
Yeah.
So
Or
it
given
wouldn't
him
have
some
mattered if
puzzle.
he asked, but yeah, you would think he would have asked, but it wouldn't have mattered. But you would think though, like Cheyenne would be like, "Hey, we're gonna have this test for him in a couple of days. So get this boy prepared and ready for the test." You would think that they would. Maybe they just don't give a shit. Like it's, well, he either makes it or he doesn't. But yeah, you would think they would have given him some kind of preparation, but they don't at all.
They seem to leave a lot of things up to the teacher relationship. Put a shit ton on the teacher to decide for the student what is most appropriate.
But you would think like they would have gave Vachette a heads up, like what was coming, so she could like have her preparation and her schedule lined up, not just like, oh hey, by the way, tomorrow test.
Yeah.
Your student's taking the big test tomorrow. Like, okay, you're just now telling me this? You can't give me a day to work with them?
This is a recurring uncomfortable dream that I have. I have these all the time, man. Where it's like I'm making it into a class and I have not prepared one single day. Or I still think about the schedules that I used to have when I was in undergraduate school and literally going, and it's like I forgot this class the whole term. I went one day and never went again, and now I have finals. That shit comes up in my. I wouldn't call it a nightmare.
Like,
it's not exactly
it's
a nightmare,
the opposite
but
personality. Like I just, even if I didn't prepare, I assumed I would do okay. Like I would figure it out somehow through osmosis or luck. I was like, I'll figure it out. I'll get through. I remember, like even in a physics class, I had a B+ going into the final. And I knew like even if I got like an F on the final, the worst I was going to get was a B- in the class. And I was like, I'm okay with a B-. And so I just didn't study for that final. And when I took the test, I didn't even read the questions. I just filled out the sheet, A, B, C, and I just guessed. And then when I got my report card, I got an A-. So somehow, like I had that like never happened for me except for this. Either the teacher just gave me an A and for whatever reason, or I guessed on that final and guessed my way into an A without reading a single question on the test. Like I either had the all-time guessing, I was the all-time guessing champ ever that day, or the teacher felt sorry for me or liked me. Wouldn't even had to feel sorry for me. I didn't have a bad grade. But I ended up, got a better grade, got an A- after that final. But that's why that's part of the reason why I've always been like, I'll figure it out.
That's insane. Well, I'm not talking about in reality because I wouldn't really allow that to happen in reality. I'm way too uptight as I've gotten older to allow something like that. But yeah, in the dreams, that's what happens. But yeah, it's interesting the way it does play out because all of a sudden it's like, boom, we're there. And it's like, oh, so the tension's all already up. He's nervous. Yeah. The nervousness it ebbs and flows throughout the chapter, and we get to live it with him. And it's really cool the way it also gets explained. The narration works really well within the chapter.
Yeah, he does a good job building up the stakes and the danger right away, because he's like, what happens if I go in there and get cut to ribbons? And she's like, that's a given that you're going to get cut. And she shows him her scar, and then he's seen Kvothe and Tempe and all the, the cuts of different people from the Adem, these shallow little cuts that they have on their body.
And so he's talking about all the old naked men at the baths too.
Yeah.
All covered in cuts.
Yeah. Yeah. With their old balls. What's that from? Big Daddy, or what is that?
Adam? No, I think it is
Adam
Big
Sandler,
Daddy.
Big Daddy. Is that the name of that? Yeah, because he's like, the girl breaks up with him and gets with some old guy.
Yeah,
he's like, it's like, yeah, have fun with his old balls. Balls are all old.
Something about laying on top of you with his old ball.
Yeah, such a hilarious line, because that would be the thing that I would think of as well. Like, ugh, gross. You look at that guy naked.
The immaturity in his in those movies was always very satisfying.
Yeah, it's perfect for my level of maturity. I have not matured significantly from my 20s to my 40s.
We get a really great version, very satisfying to me, that what gets him through this is being immature as well. And like having a ridiculous thought.
My favorite is like the people who come at you that don't like immaturity, that come at you with the like, grow up, like really grow up. Like the people who would hear us talking about like peeing on someone's leg in a shower, and they'd be like, oh, come on, get real, guys. Like that's even funnier to me. Like the thought process of like someone getting annoyed or getting upset with the immaturity makes it even funnier for me.
Yes, 100%. That's one of my brother and my favorite things to say growing up was grow up.
Yeah.
Grow up. Because my dad would get pissed and do one of those. We just do it to each other constantly. Yeah. Constantly getting our nipples twisted about nothing. We're acting as if. This is kind of the whole point, which is, that was even funnier. It always just ratcheted up even more and more.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll get right on
Jesus out of my parents.
Yeah, I'll straighten up for you. Here, just give me a minute. But yeah, and then so she talks about getting cut and shows him, and then he said there, I love that, he's like, what keeps a person from crawling on their hands and knees? She's like, pride? Like, are you gonna do this, dude? Like, seriously?
Yeah,
like, you're gonna make me look like an idiot if you go and crawl your way there.
Yeah, she has to emphasize a couple times, like, this is not what my student is going to do. Yeah. So, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Don't embarrass me out there.
I don't even like that you're asking me this. You just made me really uncomfortable. Like, I was going in here and I felt a little uneasy about whether you would get through this test. I hadn't considered that you might crawl on your belly to avoid getting cut up.
What I would like to see him do is just a bunch of cartwheels while screaming.
Just do windmilling arms, like just swinging his arms, screaming with his head down, windmilling.
They just got a huge laugh from everybody. And then shameful looks. They just bow their heads like, oh, this guy's a joke. Those barbarians. Yeah, what do you expect?
That's how he saves, face for the barbarians, makes the barbarians look good. Goes in screaming at the top of his lungs, windmilling and kicking out his legs while he runs. Eyes closed, runs straight into the tree, knocks himself out.
Actually, that I would like to see. That would be a comical way to play this out in film or television.
Yeah,
is like the things he could do. Just show those clips. Like that like he does that.
Yeah.
Another one he just crawls, like you said. Another one he just, I don't know, does the karaoke run, just sideways, like hips swiveling, does one of those.
Oh man, yeah. And then so he's like, so this is a test of nerve, a test of pride. It's like, it's a test of many things. Your behavior signifies a great deal. You could throw your arms over your face and rush ahead. The straightest line is the quickest, after all. But what does that reveal of you? Are you a bull that charges blindly? Are you an animal without subtlety or grace? She shook her head, frowning. I expect better from a student of mine. Suppose it's not allowed to ask what the proper choice is. And she's like, tells him that there's many, many proper choices, and it's like, it's different for everyone. What you bring back symbolic. Is important. How you bring it back it's important. How you present it is important. So it's very much a subjective test.
It's all about symbolism with them, and that's kind of goes back to what we were saying before, where they're very much. I mean, I kind of use the word uptight. I guess that's not really necessarily the right word, but they're very. I guess no, that's not the right word at all. But they're very. I don't know, man. They like to intuit things.
Yeah.
Right? And that seems to be definitely, or to some degree, the case with all this symbolism is, well, there's many right ways to do it, and there's some wrong ways to do it, and we'll see what's right for you and what's wrong for you. And I mean, he hits a home run, obviously.
it's very similar to like how his writing style is, kind of the way their society is, as far as like he leaves things open he implies things without being explicit. And so there's many different ways you can interpret things. Could imply a number of different things because nothing is explicit, and their society, nothing is really explicit. Everything is implied, and there's many different implications pointing in many different directions for everything you do, and how it's interpreted is a large part of what they value as a school, and as a society, is your ability to interpret things and interpret the implications and find the truth, and a lot of that's subjective, and that's where
I was going to say
they have different opinions.
A lot of it says a lot about you, that individual, how they see it, how they interpret it, says a lot about that individual and their willingness to kind of allow the Lethani to push them along or to guide them. And I love that about all the objects, because we don't know what they all mean, but you can really go nuts with trying to interpret, what an old, vintage coin means, or, the gold bar or any of it.
Yeah. And also like with what Kvothe does with holding his hand out and letting himself get cut, they interpret it as he's willing to bleed for the school. Mm-hmm. But that doesn't necessarily mean that's what he implied by it. That's how they interpreted it. But we don't get in Kvothe's head to know exactly what he was thinking when he did it.
That's a great way to do it too, when you think about it, because it does have the vision of Siride. And you do wonder, because we don't get a conscious thought of Kvothe's mind of why he did what he did. You almost wonder, was it just, it happened, sleeping mind taking over, doing what it would do rather than what he would consciously do. Yeah.
But you see how subjective it is, because we don't have Kvothe being like, yeah, they guessed it. Exactly right. That's why I did it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I love maybe that's why I did it, but
the way he does play it out, it's getting ahead, but fuck it, we're talking about it, is Vachette's reactions. It's great, man. Yeah. It's like, you fucking jackass. Like, what's your deal, man?
Yeah.
But then I has to admit, you completely killed it the way you did it. Everybody's shocked and thinks you're big shit, but I think you're a jackass. How about that?
Yeah. Yeah. I don't even think he was thinking. Like, I think, again, it was similar to when the sleeping mind would take over, when he would go into spinning leaf and the sleeping mind would kind of take over. He would pull the answers out of his head without thought. Mm-hmm. It would just instinctually come to him. I just think that was what his instinct was to do, without like really thinking it through. Like, I'm doing this because this, and this is what I hope the reaction was. He was just like instinctually, this is the right thing to do.
It does seem like those moments also when he's allowing himself to be guided. Like when he plays his music, when he's broken,
Yeah.
And the music is played through him. And it's like he plays some experiences, like riding in the wagon with Ben is an experience he had, right? But he's like intuiting other things that he's experienced and just allowing it to come through him. And that's when people are like moved to tears, and they're completely shocked by what he's able to do. And and those things are never, at least as I can remember, not typically explicitly stated by Kvothe what he did. It's just that's what happened.
That's going to be one of the hardest parts of the adaptation. No, I've never read anything or watched a movie or TV show or anything that's made me like weep in tears. Maybe get a lump in my throat, but that's as most as I've ever gotten. Never like broke down and cried. If whatever music Kvothe plays in the adaptation doesn't make me cry, I'm going to flip over tables. I'm going to scream and yell at the screen. I'm going to ruin the movie for everybody. I will not accept anything else other than this better be the first time I ever cry from like a music or a movie or something.
A song with no lyrics? That's gonna do it for you?
Yeah, it better. Wow. Like the song he plays, with Dinah and all those crews when he leaves Tarbean. If that song doesn't make me run out of the theater in tears, then I'm going to throw shit at the screen and I'm going to lose my mind.
I will say this: if there's a theater full of people weeping, that would be a massive, massive accomplishment. I don't think it's going to happen.
No.
It sounds like a very tall order that you're going for. But
Could you imagine, like, if you were in a theater and there was just music, no lyrics, just someone playing an instrument, and everybody in the theater like started bawling their eyes out? I would be like, "What the hell? Where am I?"
I would think
I was like, this was like Invasion of the Body Snatchers or something, or like I just walked into a cult, viewing of a theater, a movie at a theater.
What I would also wonder about, remember the South Park episode where they have like the brown note?
Yeah.
That's what I would be thinking is happening.
Well, why didn't it affect me? Why am I immune to the brown note?
Because you're a cyborg.
Yeah.
This is when you find out for sure.
Yeah. I find out. Ah, shit, Tim's right. Why have I been eating all this food all this time? What a waste of money.
It's the blue note. They play the blue note.
But yeah, and so he asks Bichette, why are there so many people here? If it's, can they overrule Shane's decision? She's like, no, it's her decision. But, you still, even though it's her decision, technically, you don't want to cause waves where you do something that is just completely diametrically opposed by everybody and every other school, where they all have a problem with your decision making. That's going to cause problems for your school.
It's again a great example of the hand talk adding so much. It's so great, man, because she says no one would question her decision. Hand says, however. That's it. Yeah. That's what they leave it to. You had to explain it the way you explained it to really interpret what that means for us in our language. Yeah. But we still see it in the book. It's amazing. There's another thing that is lost on a show. Like, there's no way. Like, how do you? I mean, with subtitles, you'd have to put in like a parenthetical, however, interpreting the hand signal.
I think, you probably have to have subtitles for, just same way if someone was speaking sign language on a show, you would either, the way they would do that is either through subtitles or someone interpreting it. And so you obviously wouldn't have someone interpreting it. So you'd have to do it through subtitles.
I really hope they hire as a consultant the guy that faked that he knew how to do sign language for those huge events.
Oh yeah, she does. The hand signal is, however, that's a weird one, because however is a hand signal. Like, I guess maybe it's like more of a, instead of just saying however, more it's like a kind of shrug. Maybe it's the equivalent to a shrug.
But that's still understating it, because a shrug can be interpreted in many ways. Their hand signals are very precise. That's what's so interesting about them. It's not like nonverbal communication sometimes can be quite precise, but it's also very much open to interpretation as well. So, no, it's a difficult one to pin down.
Yeah, and I mean, but it lets them know, like, okay, she gets to make the decision, but it's still, there's lines that she's not going to cross. She's not going to just push him through no matter what.
If it's pretty, and like she ends up saying, what he does, nobody else can really, the way he did it, no one else can really be angry about it or argue against it. The fact that
they can complain, but it's not going to hold any weight. It's not going to negatively impact them if someone complains. Where if went a different way and enough people complained, it could negatively impact the school, and to the point where she would, even if she felt like she wanted to pass him, she might not, because of how it would impact their school in a negative way.
How it would look. So that, however, is it's kind of another don't embarrass me out there. Not exactly that, but it's kind of along the lines of there is a lot riding on this. So,
it raises the stakes for him that even if Shane loves you and really wants to push you through, if you don't impress enough, she's not going to do it. She's not going to sacrifice the school or the school's reputation for you. Mm-hmm. You're going to have to impress enough to where she can pass you through, and it's not going to significantly hurt the school.
Yeah, man. And he impresses in some wild ass ways, man.
Yeah. Yeah, because he walks out. He says, "I walked to the sword tree for a moment. The wind eased, and the thick canopy of hanging branches reminded me of the tree where I had met the Kvothe. It was not a comforting thought. I watched the spinning leaves, trying not to think of how sharp they were, how they would slice into the meat of me, how they would glide through the thin skin of my hands and slice the delicate tendons underneath." He really lays out the danger that you got basically these spinning knives, razor blades almost, that are just flying through the air. These leaves that are hard, thick razor blades.
Yeah, they sound like razor blade because of how easily they cut. It's not even a knife to some degree needs a little bit of force, but with the spinning razor, it's just whatever it touches, man, it's gonna slice.
Yeah.
Good. I guess you get an interesting haircut,
Yeah.
If you think about it. You just put your head in there. It's like a Floby.
Yeah.
Like I said, it doesn't suck and cut. It just it's all going down. So.
Well, and then he talks about how the trunk, it's only 30 feet. So it's not that
from
far.
The canopy to the tree.
For where he's got to walk, they're in the danger zone is only 30 feet. So
are you going to sing it?
Sing it?
That's your guy. Danger Zone. That's Michael McDonald.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that is your guy. You're the one that always brings him up. I've never once brought him up.
That's your dude. What are you talking about?
But yeah, so yeah, he's in the danger zone. I always think of Archer whenever I think of danger zone now. Like, Lana, say it, danger zone.
God, that show's great.
But yeah,
watch those.
So that's not that far. I mean, 30 feet. What is that? Like 700 yards?
What? What the hell? Yeah, but really though, that really isn't that far. But that does tell you
10 yards.
A shit ton of these things flying down.
He's only got to cover 10 yards. So 10 yards I could cover in 1 second.
But I mean, that does tell you. So this is just constant flowing. But the fact that everybody gets cut, like the expectation is you're going to get cut. Like that's what's going to happen.
There must be a ton of leaves falling because, yeah, you would think you could just wait for a 1 second gap. I mean, I can cover 10 yards in no time flat. It wouldn't be hard. Yeah. So it doesn't seem like it's that difficult. But if there's an endless stream of leaves that are flying around that are cutting and that are going to slice you up, you're going to take that 10 yards a little bit more delicately.
That's what he does.
Yeah. And so, he goes and takes it to a whole nother level because he thinks of Celine and how she was able to do it. And he starts thinking, if she could do it, I could do it. And he's like, wow, no. He's like, she's tiny. Yeah. She's super small. She's quicker than me. She can move better than me. It's like,
she's been doing this her whole life.
China shop here. He's like, I'm just not as athletic as her. And then he's like, when you're alone, it's easy to be afraid. It's easy to focus on what might be lurking in the dark at the bottom of the cellar steps. It's easy to obsess on unproductive things like the madness of stepping into the storm of spinning knives. When you're alone, it's easy to sweat, panic, fall apart. And he's thinking this as he's standing there, just looking at this. But then he looked around and he sees that there's a big audience. And he's like, but I wasn't alone. And it wasn't just Fichette and Cheyenne watching me. There were a dozen mercenaries in the heads of other schools besides. I had an audience. I was on stage. And there is nowhere in the world I am more comfortable than on stage.
Yeah, it's pretty
I love that aspect of it. It's just that constant, anytime like when him puts him on a stage or anytime like when he's in Traben and he's got to act and there's people around or like Fella and to say Fella at the fishery, anytime the pressure's on, there's people there. It's time to be the hero, time to be the big moment. This dude's made for those moments.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly right. He's made for the moments. He capitalizes every time, virtually.
He's clutch,
he kills
man.
It. It's almost when you read it back through, it's almost you almost expect I am a Maru because he throws that in so often.
Mm-hmm.
Here he doesn't mention it, but it does speak to his, and that always harkens back to the lineage and his bloodline, and the fact that he does excel in all these types of situations, almost like something takes over, you know. But I also just love the element of it because I mean it's applicable to all of us. That moment when you are alone in the dark, that's the only time. If you walk into a room with a whole bunch of people and it's dark, it's funny. It's kind of fun and funny. If you're by yourself, your mind goes wild with where anything could be, what's there, all that type of stuff. So it's true to life. I'm gonna throw that in there.
It's like if you go into a room and it's completely dark and the bed is like 30 feet away, you have to run and jump on it or the monsters will grab your ankles.
Well, or you have those situations. The only times when you forget, well, I don't count steps, but when you're going up steps, you think there's a next one and there's not. It's very uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Or going down, same thing. Like you're not sure what the next step is or where the handrail is, and you kind of freak out a little bit.
I had a moment not that long ago where like I kind of jammed up my back because the way the curb was painted, I was kind of just like reading something on my phone, and then there was the edge of this curb was painted, but there was no drop down. It was all flat surface, so there was no reason to paint it. Like there was a step that I had to be aware of. But I just kind of see the color, and so I assume I'm stepping down, and I go to step, but there is no step. So when I hit the ground sooner than I expected, it jarred the shit out of my back. Where I was like, what the fuck?
It's like such a funny way.
Like, how did I hurt myself because there was no step? Those are the moments when you feel old, where you're like, what exactly? The fuck? I just hurt myself because there's no step. I thought there was a step and there wasn't, and now I'm hurt.
First of all, just the phrase, like, I hurt my back or my back hurts is old man shit.
Yeah.
But then if someone asks, oh, what happened? And that's your explanation, like, dude, you're old as shit, dude.
Yeah.
There was no step and you thought
I expected my foot was going to step like 3 centimeters further down. And that 3 centimeters up, I wasn't expecting it. It completely fucked up my back.
This is going to be how you throw out your hip in 40 years.
Yeah.
Be on a step and I pop my hip out. What happened?
Or the reverse happens when you step off a step and you don't expect it. It does jar you when you think you're stepping down and then there's no step down. It jars you. I'd never had it actually hurt me physically where it was like, oh, what the...
No, that's literally what I'm talking. Like sometimes I'll be up late working on stuff. The whole house is dark once I go upstairs. And once you go upstairs after being in a room that was lit, your eyes have not adjusted. So you can't see damn anything. So yeah, when you think there's a step and there's not, it is jarring.
Yeah.
It's all scary. And then you sprint because the monsters.
Yeah. That's the thing I worry about is the monsters. Like they haven't got me yet. And so I'm going to keep doing it. But yeah, and so I like too that he's sitting there when he starts watching the branches before he slips into seeing the name of the wind. I like he was just watching it, trying to come up with a strategy. And he's like, okay, he's just waiting for a gap. And he's like, I can use, one of these moves that I've learned from the K10. I can use that to kind of slap him away, keep him away from my face. And I can just wait for an opening. And he's like, but the motion of the trees lulled me like it had so many times before. It was beautiful, all circles and arcs. As I watched, gently dazed by the motion of the tree, I felt my mind slip slightly into the clear, empty float of spinning leaf. I realized the motion of the tree wasn't random at all, really. It was actually a pattern made of endless changing patterns. And then my mind open and empty, I saw the wind spread out before me. It was like frost forming on a blank sheet of window glass. One moment, nothing. The next, I could see the name of the wind as clearly as the back of my own hand. I love that description because that's why I say spinning leaf is kind of like a window into the name of the wind. Mm-hmm. And now that he's got this easy access where he can kind of open this up and close it, I think it's why he takes a significant step forward here versus when he calls the name of the wind with Valerian, or when he calls the name of the wind against Ambrose. He doesn't have easy access to it after that. He's not able to just slip right back into it. Here, he loses it for a second, but then he slips right back into it. And then when he gets back and he starts using it more, he starts having easier access to it. It starts coming to him easier and easier. And I think it's that spinning leaf is giving him kind of the more control than just the wild door open of the sleeping mind, just doors wide open. And it's massive, overwhelming experience for him where he's just seeing everything and he can't even process the information. Whereas this is more of a controlled access to the sleeping mind. It seems different.
Yeah. Well, and part of me also wonders how much of it is he's in this world. He's in Ademre, and how much is it? How much of it is because of where he is? You know, I think there's a combination going, but we also we have continuously seen him getting better and better grasp of the Name of the Wind as well. So it's masterfully written. The way he arcs it out overall with these incidents are tremendous, you know. But then to mix it in with what happens here, but what I do think is so important, like you mentioned, he loses it and brings it back, not fully consciously, right, the second time, but it comes back like that.
Yeah,
right? Like he was in it, and then it just kind of was still. It was almost like it was still active, but went away and then comes right back. Yeah.
Yeah, he just had to relax. He lost it in a moment, which is interesting because he loses it in a kind of a moment of anger, which normally like a high emotion brought it to him. Yeah. This time it threw him out of it. And then once he calmed back down again, then it came back to him again.
So I think
it's a different experience. And I do think that's part of the environment, because we've seen him when he's watching the tree, he started to see patterns. He mentions patterns in the wind multiple times while he's here. And just this time, it fully, with the pressure of the situation, being on the stage, it just fully, everything kind of came into place and he locked in.
I think that's a really important part of it as well, is the fact that he eases into it rather than being heightened into it. I think is huge, right? This is more of like an load and access, right? Where he eases into these things rather than being forced or pushed, throttled into, which would be more jarring.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's like kind of the way I envision it is like the spinning leaf gives him kind of access through a window versus throwing the doors wide open and not having any kind of real control over it, where it's kind of controlling you.
Mm-hmm.
That seems to be the difference, is like spinning leaf has given him that more controlled access to it than he's had before, where it's less intense. I mean, he sees it, he's able to call it, he's able to control it, but it's not as intense. He doesn't need a Loden to wake him out of a catatonic state, after this, and he doesn't need to stand there and bawl his eyes out for a while with Florian. Like those were intense emotional moments that were extremely jarring coming out of. Here he comes out of it and he's fine immediately. There's no that wildness is not there this time.
Yeah, it's interesting, those two occurrences as well, because they're kind of also like self-defense. With Florian it's fully basically self-defense. With Ambrose it is hostile. And then here it's coming out of, I mean, there's a lot of nervousness and stakes are high, but he's relaxed.
Yeah.
And he sees it, and then it comes to. So the experiences are very different. It's really cool. And then he's cognizant enough to he has the choice of utilizing it in one way, stopping the wind. Well, that seems wrong. So he makes another choice, and it's great. I mean, envisioning the experience is very, very satisfying as a reader.
That's a huge part of naming. I think that's important, like, to understand as far as how to utilize it. Because when he sees it, he says, I looked around for a moment, marveling in it. I tasted the shape of it on my tongue and knew if I desired, I could stir it to a storm. I could hush it to a whisper, leaving the sword tree hanging empty and still, but that seemed wrong. Instead, I simply opened my eyes wide to the wind, watching where it would choose to push the branches, watching where it would flick the leaves. And so then he steps out there, he sees the pattern, and he sees where the wind is directing everything, where everything's going to go, and he knows perfectly where to step. He knows exactly how far he can move, where he has to move to avoid being cut. And he's moving just perfectly, and he that's when he's like, notices I'm moving like Cheyenne moves when she fights. It's like I'm taking the perfect steps and it's the perfect movements, and I'm moving in lockstep with the pattern. And I don't think that that's just, I think that's significant in that it shows you that you're able to kind of see the name of these things, but you don't have to call it. You could just see it and feel it and look at it. But if you want to actually activate it and utilize the power, you have to call the name. You have to physically speak the name. You have to say the word. There's like some kind of locking mechanism before you can use the power, that you have to say the word to trigger that power, to utilize it for your own purpose. But then also what Cheyenne's doing, I don't think that she's just taking the perfect steps because she's practiced fighting a lot. I think it's part of this naming and this sleeping mind, and whether she's conscious of it or not, I do think that this is the example where you can really figure out, like, okay, they're doing something more than just they practice real hard at fighting.
Yeah, she's seeing the Matrix, and that's what he's seeing, and his ability to. I love that they make that comparison, because it really locks a lot of things in for us in terms of what happens within the Adem and what they're able to do in this world, in particularly here, but then also carry that out. So they are accessing it. It seems. The fact that he's able to sit in it and not trigger, right, says a lot about how much control he has now. And how he's going to be able to wield it in the future, because now he's sitting in it and taking his moments. Meaning, think about, he gets control of other things. He gets those rings, right? Well, when he gets control of these other things, he's not going to be all hot headed with the wind, or what, like with stone or fire, whatever he ends up with. Because why would he recede back to that earlier experience, right? Like Elodin, I believe, was the one that talked about starting with the wind. I mean, that was one of the things that the old masters, starting with the wind is one of the best places to start, because if you can wield, I don't know, if you can control the wind, you can control so many other things because you've gone through the motions.
Yeah, I think probably the reason for that is the wind is ever changing, and I think that there's less changing with stone, and so I bet you that if you can grasp something that is, because Elodin talks about like the name of the wind, he's like, it's different from place to place, but I know how to look for it. And I think that's why it's easier to call the name of the wind. If you learned how to call the name of the wind, it's easier to figure out the others, because I don't think they're changing from place to place. I think that they're more, once you know how to call the stone, you probably, know it for good. Like it's not different from place to place. So I think that's likely why.
Variation.
Yeah.
But, well, and that's why I bring that up also, to consider if he ends up with all these rings, he's just going to have better mastery, given the fact that he's gone from, breaking Ambrose's arm in a huge gust, and then someone else having to pull him out of it, and then his experience with Florin, and then what that does to him, and all these. Now he's able to basically turn it on and off to a pretty significant degree. Now he's being helped, and it does seem like this is happening in this world. He's being helped, but it's just got to get easier and easier, because it has been.
Yeah.
I mean, it seems logical to expect that, I would say.
Now, when he sees the name of the wind, obviously for this part, everything turns green, and it's the numbers, the ones and zeros, all coming down. And he sees it.
It's all the code. It's just coding.
Yeah. Just like the Matrix.
Yeah, that would be an odd choice if they were to just homage the shit out of visually homage the Matrix. I do see definite value in music and doing some slow-mo, a little bit of that, some depth perception, messing around with some zoom and tracking and stuff like that.
What if it's like a real big fat guy, huge belly, that's got little tiny wings, and he's flying around and he's just blowing everything.
They just go into animation suddenly. Yeah, it's all. Yeah, they just suddenly launch into animation when things slow down.
Like when you see the name of the wind, you see like a big fat fairy blowing.
It's a cupid,
blowing.
A big fat cupid.
Yeah, like a cupid, but he just blows air on everything and blows things around. Once you see that pattern, what he's blowing at, you know where everything's going.
That'd be an odd choice. That'd be a very, very odd choice to run with. But
It could work. It could work. You could do it. You could pull it off. I think people would really like it.
I don't think so. I think people would be very upset. They would be confused.
It'd be worth trying on a really big budget movie. You gotta take chances like that.
Yeah. Launch into some really strange bring in some other force. Sounds very strange.
But yeah, and then so he goes and he dodges everything, and then he's like, almost before I realized it, I was standing on the dark earth that circled the wide trunk of the sword tree. He's like, the sword I had seen from the edge of the clearing was bound to the tree with a white silk cord that ran around the trunk. The sword was half drawn from its sheath. I could see the blade was similar to Vichette's sword. The metal was an odd burnished gray without a mark or blemish. And he sees, like, there's a red shirt, there's an arrow with the stark white fletching and polished wooden cylinder of the sort that would hold a scroll. Bright glitter caught my eye, and I turned to see a thick gold bar nestled into the dark earth among the roots of the tree. He goes and picks up the gold and sees it was enough gold for me to stay at the university forever, no matter how viciously they raised my tuition. But you should take the gold at that point. That should have been your choice right then. You're like, yeah, that's mine. I'm going to take this, and if you guys try to cut my tendons because you're not going to let me in the school, I'm going to call a tornado and throw you guys all around, and I'm going to walk out of here rich as shit.
All about the gold, huh?
Yeah. Take that gold.
It is interesting how he gets very he starts to get what would be the word, self-conscious in terms of his abilities. Like, well, look, I don't know if I'll be able to get back out of here. So at least if I take the bar, it'll be like, well, it's heavy, so that's going to screw up my ability to move. So I'll try to make a good show of things at least.
Yeah.
Where it's just complete desperation when he actually is legitimately considering it. Yeah, it's like a fallback once he's lost. I believe it's after he lost the.
Yeah, he loses the name of the wind, then he's
then he kind of freaks.
Yeah. But yeah, he's also, he sees like a fluttering piece of silk hanging from a low branch. So that reminds me of like the Eighth and Wraith story. Mm-hmm. And so there's symbolism to obviously these gifts, and there's some things that you would have to know their culture to really understand them. Like if you didn't know the 99 stories, you wouldn't have any idea what the hell the silk is all about. But once you hear it, you understand it. So when you hear some of these other gifts, you probably think that there's probably stories behind those as well. There were 3 blue flowers tied with blue ribbon. There was a tarnished finish halfpenny. There was a long flat whetstone dark with oil. Like there's these things like what do they mean? What do they mean? It's not only just what do they mean to me, but what are they going to mean to Cheyenne? Well, how is she going to interpret them? And how is she going to interpret them coming from me? So it's getting into a lot of psychological levels that he's trying to figure out. Then he sees that his loot case was hung up against the tree.
Wasn't there a book? That was one thing that I thought was significant. A book with a key.
I can't remember. There could have been,
because that was one that kind of jumped out at me because how important books are in this world, and especially to him. And I don't know. I thought I saw something like that. Secret book kind of all jarred that in my mind.
Yeah, I mean it's tough to say because just none of the stuff is explained in a way where it has any seeming importance to the bigger story. I mean, they could, but you would need the context of the things. He doesn't really go into the nitty gritty of what the things are, what they could mean. He just mentions like without the context, hard to kind of figure out what exactly why those things are there. But when he sees his loot, he's like seeing it there, knowing someone had gone into my room and taken it from under my bed, filled me with a sudden terrible rage. And I think that's interesting because it's the rage that pulls him out. Whereas before, always in these moments, it would be something that would kick into gear the sleeping mind. This time the rage pulled him out of it. So it's a massive difference between the calling of the name of the wind and his access to it this time is in the complete opposite direction of what it was previously.
Yeah. It's Well, yeah, it stands stark difference for sure, and it's cool. It's really interesting the way he took it. The Rothfuss chose to sort of lay it out and have it, give that opposite sort of access versus loss of.
But now he knows that everybody there knows that he's a tawdry whore. He's not only a barbarian, but he's a tawdry whore at that.
He calls himself that.
Yeah.
He's now seeing himself as a tawdry whore.
I was left there to taunt him, and it worked. It worked very well. It's like, I had called the name of the wind in a grip of terrible anger before, in Imre after Ambrose had broken my lute, and I'd called it in terror and fury to defend myself against Florian. But this time, the knowledge of it had come to me not born on the back of some strong emotion. I had slipped into it gently, the way you must reach out and catch a gently floating thistle seed, which is a callback to Elodin chasing those seeds.
It's hilarious. That's such a great scene, man.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that's a nice
call. Like, I mean, because he didn't understand that lesson at all until he doesn't explicitly say, now I get the lesson, but he's obviously figuring out the lesson there. It's like now that he slipped into it, he realized, like, okay, it's much easier when you kind of just let it come to you. I just was watching the tree and I just let it come to me, the name of the wind. I didn't, it wasn't some strong emotion that pulled it out of me. It wasn't fighting for it, trying to call the name of the wind. It just slipped into it. And he's like, now he finally understands what that lesson Elodin was trying to teach was. And he's like frantically going around grabbing at it. He wasn't able to catch anything. It was only once he sat down, banged his shin and sat down on the ground that it just came to him.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah, that's one of the things that is so great about Elodin's lessons is that it keeps happening, right? He keeps finding these realizations way after the fact, but he keeps white knuckling the whole experience. That's why he's so frustrated, because he's trying so freaking hard. And that's what Elodin keeps saying, man, stop trying to grab my tits. You get out of my face, bro.
Yeah, I mean, once he told that story to Martin about the boy with the ass falling off and his dad telling him in that, and then he was like, sometimes the questions are better. And he was like, oh shit. He's like that. And then now he's starting to realize that there's a method to the madness, and he's starting to learn from the lessons that Elodin taught. And then when he goes back to the university, they have a much better experience together as student and teacher. Because now he is starting to understand what Elodin was trying to get him to grasp. He's getting a better picture. Not fully. He's not understanding fully, but he understands that if Elodin's having him do something, it's not because he's an insane person. It's because he's trying to get him to access a part of his mind that's nearly impossible to access. And so you have to push yourselves in weird directions to be able to do it.
Yeah, it seems it's all about nuance.
Yeah.
Right? It's all about allowing and whatnot, rather than trying to force it. It takes him a long time. It takes him life experience as well. Like Elodin said, go to the ends of the world, and that's kind of how it all eventually comes to him, to some degree.
Yeah, and so seeing the lute completely throws him out of the name of the wind. He loses it. Says the name of the wind tattered to shreds, leaving me empty and blind. Looking around at the madly dancing leaves, I could see no pattern at all. Only 1,000 wind-blown razors slicing at the air. It should be a weird experience. Like when you go from, you see this pattern, every move that everything's going to make, and then the pattern's gone completely. You don't see anything there anymore. And it's just leaves blown in the wind. Be like, what the fuck was that?
Also, now you're inside of it, and you can't, it's different when you're out and walking in. Now he's inside, and he's got to walk out.
Yeah. Yeah,
it's pretty tense.
Got no choice. You have to walk out. There's nowhere else to go. Once you're out, you don't have to walk in. You have that choice. But once you're in, there's no other way out.
Yeah, it's super intense.
Or he'd be like, get a canopy.
Yeah.
Bring it over here. Cover me out. I'm not coming out. I will stay here forever.
He's gonna wish they left some food.
Fichette's sitting there like giving him the stink eye, like, get the hell out of here now. You're embarrassing me. I don't care if it's Fichette, not coming.
Like a little kid.
It scares
throwing a
me.
tantrum.
It's like, we just saw you go in. You were dancing around. Just do that.
I can't do it anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, so he starts walking around the tree, looking at everything, makes one pass.
Biding his time.
Yeah, he's just trying to bide for time, trying to figure something out. Not only does he not see the name of the wind, but then he doesn't even know what to bring him. And the loot's throwing him off. But he's like, Vachette had said the test was more than what I brought back from the tree. It was also how I brought it and what I did with it afterwards. If I brought out the heavy bar of gold and gave it to Cheyenne, would that show I was willing to bring money to the school? Or would it signify that I would cling greedily to something heavy and unwieldy despite the fact it put me in danger? So he talks about like the different things and the double meanings that they would have, and it could mean one thing or it could mean another. And he just keeps making these circles around it, trying to come to some kind of a conclusion. He's like, as I looked at them all, I realized any choice I made could be interpreted so many ways. I didn't know nearly enough about Adem culture to guess what my item might signify, which would be a huge problem.
Yeah.
And once you would see that ribbon, then you would understand more of the concept of, shit, I don't know their culture, their stories. Like, I get that this ribbon probably has something to do with Aeth and Wraith, but what would bringing it back signify to them? What does it mean to them? So it's like, even if you know what the ribbon might be in reference to, you don't know what it's going to signify bringing it back to them. You don't understand their culture at all, really. You have a barest grasp of it.
Yeah, it seems like even something like that, it's like, oh, I've heard this story, so I bring this back, and they're like, yeah, but that could be completely backfire.
You're saying you're as good as Wraith?
Yeah,
you're saying you're as good as Wraith. And I'm Aeth? I'm the punk bitch in this scenario that killed my student? Are you calling me a murderer?
I mean, it could be as simple as like, oh, I've heard this story, so I know what it means to be Adem. It's like, no, you don't. And that's extraordinarily presumptuous. And now we hate you and you're going to die.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot at stake, obviously.
But yeah, so he keeps going. It's like, I looked at the gold bar again. If I chose that, at least the weight of it would give me an excuse for being so awkward on my way out. Perhaps I could make a good showing of it. Nervously, I made a third circuit of the tree. In the middle of that anxious moment, I was suddenly aware of nothing as much as the sudden urgent pressure on my bladder. My biology cared nothing for the gravity of my situation, and I was seized with a powerful need to relieve myself. Massive part of the story. Obviously, the most important aspect of the story of both books that we've come across. Talks about his bladder, and it was being full. And there's pressure on his bladder. And he cared nothing about the situation except for he felt a powerful need to relieve himself. What does that mean? Like there's so many what he needed to like take in a bunch of deep breaths and kind of relieve himself that way? Or does it mean like take a piss?
Well,
like
he does
pee out urine.
Well, he does say pissing on the tree.
Yeah, but I mean, you could be like, I'm taking a piss out of a guy. Like, you're fucking, you're taking the piss. And it's like, so it could be like playing a prank on the tree or something, or playing a prank with their tree. Like, there's so many different ways you can interpret all this stuff. It's impossible to know exactly what he means.
That is quite a leap. But yeah, it's.
I think it's a perfectly logical way to interpret this stuff. Until he pulls out his little wiener and we hear about urination coming out of that wiener and spraying that tree, we do not know what he means.
I love the image, though, because he talks about being surrounded by mercenaries all watching him. They have a sacred tree, and I like picturing him pissing on the tree, big middle finger to the crowd.
Yeah.
Fuck you guys.
Come get some. Come get me.
He waits for this moment. He is on a stage. He's really gonna,
pulls out a piece of bread, wipes his ass, and eats it.
Jesus. What a callback.
Yeah.
What a callback just to really, really rub it in for the readers and everybody. Everybody's just absolutely horrified by this.
You guys want to see a barbarian? I'll give you a barbarian.
He's the gladiator. Are you not entertained? Moment.
Yeah.
He instead of taking a piss, takes a dump.
Yeah.
And wipes.
Rothfuss,
so, by the way, we still don't know.
Rothfuss is like, you guys want your poop and pee.
We still don't know they poop. That there's any poops, right?
No, we don't. We don't know that he's talking about urine here. We don't know that he's talking about like peeing in our world. It's close. Granted, I would say this is your best evidence that people take pees in this book. This is the best evidence for that. It's why it's the most monumental aspect of the story so far. So clearly, hugely significant. It's a huge clue, and it definitely is your best evidence that he has to take bathroom breaks. But why hasn't he been taking them every chapter? Like, you know, I have to use the restroom like at least once every few hours. Like, I'm not going, you know, other than when I'm sleeping, I'm not going like 8-9 hour periods of time without urinating. So Kvothe, we're with him for long periods of time, and he never talks about taking a leak.
So we talk about how Rothfuss, you know, does a very good job of choosing what he puts into the books, and you're saying he is missing an opportunity here. Like he should be showing the bathroom breaks?
if people use the, you know, take pees and take poops in this book, obviously that should be part of the stories, because otherwise it's not realistic.
So every time we go to an interlude, it starts with, after I use the bathroom.
After I took this massive deuce. By dropped a deuce, I mean I cut a turd off. Boom. Dropped it right into the toilet.
I think wash his hands.
I had to wash my hands.
He's flossing.
And I also
brushing his teeth before he goes to bed.
I brushed my teeth, and it was a bad choice because I should have brushed my teeth first, but I waited.
Yeah,
that I want these kind of aspects in the story.
Yeah. Where he brushes his teeth, but then he's like, man, I really did want to eat cheese balls, though. Shit. I can't do it now.
I was more thinking that he dropped a deuce and then he brushed his teeth afterwards. And he was like, that was a mistake. Should have brushed my teeth before I did that. I'm just like sitting in the stink while I'm brushing my teeth.
Okay.
See, we're bringing that maturity level this episode.
Well, and the realism, man. The realism.
And the realism, yeah.
You know? The realism that we think could be contained in this world, but perhaps not.
Yeah, it's a huge, huge mystery. And I definitely think, you know, it's important to talk about because...
Remember early on, one of the early episodes, I think we posited that he has a cloak with a poop hole.
Yeah. It just drops into the Fae.
Yeah, it drops in the Fae. We're picturing like the Prestige with top hats.
Yeah.
There's a field with a bunch of Kvothe poops.
Yeah. Oh, man.
It's somebody's house in the Fae, and they're just like, what the fuck?
What is happening? Why? Why, God?
They keep thinking some satyr like Bast is dropping deuces in their yard.
Just crying, laughing. It's a prank. Florian played on one of her Fae neighbors.
Well, she did make the shade, you know? So maybe she sewed that in there, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's weird. It's weird he doesn't... Well, you know, Rothfuss is leaving some real gems for book 3. That'll be in there for sure.
Yeah.
We'll get that
obviously, you have to solve that mystery. I mean, you have to really solidify whether there's poops and peas in the story. You can't just leave this open like this, especially when you have a huge dingleberry hanging like this one in this little mystery.
Jesus. He rewrites the prologue.
You have to deal with that.
He rewrites the prologue that we got, and he includes in that interlude that that cloak's got that magic poop hole.
Yeah.
Poop
yeah,
hatch.
that would be the way to deal with it.
Yeah, reveal it early, you know. Just really, you know, start strong. Blow people's heads out, you know, nips off.
Then he goes, you know, at that moment, no longer boiling with anger, no longer gripped with fear, I looked at the moving leaves around me. Always before, when the name of the wind had left me, it had faded like a dream on waking, irretrievable as an echo or a fading sigh. But this time it was different. I spent hours watching the patterns of these moving leaves. I looked out through the branches of the tree and thought of Celine, jumping and spinning, laughing and running. And there it was, like the name of an old friend that had simply slipped my mind for a moment. I looked out among the branches and I saw the wind. I spoke the long name of it gently, and the wind grew gentle. I breathed it out as a whisper, and for the first time since I had come to Hert, the wind went quiet and utterly still. Like in this place of endless wind, it seemed as if the world were suddenly holding its breath. The unceasing dance of the sword tree slowed, then stopped, as if it were resting, as if it had decided to let me go. I stepped away from the tree and began to walk slowly towards Cheyenne, bringing nothing with me. As I walked, I raised my left hand and drew open my palm across the razor edge of a hanging leaf. I came to stand before Cheyenne, stopping the polite distance from her. I stood, my face an impassive mask. I stood, utterly silent, perfectly still. I extended my left hand, bloody palm up, and closed it into a fist. The gesture meant willing. There was more blood than I had expected, and it pressed between my fingers to run down the back of my hand. After a long moment, Cheyenne nodded. I relaxed, and only then did the wind return. So it's another callback to the Siri Day as well. The bloody hand of the Amir.
Yeah, it's badass, man.
Yeah.
The vision of this guy goes in, right? He does the perfect steps. Then we're like, what the fuck? This guy has this ability. We've seen him fight, right? Heard about him. Like, suddenly he has this ability. Then he does a few walks around. Who knows what he's thinking? Who knows what's going on there? And then stops the wind.
Yeah. Stops wind, walks out with nothing, and then does this dramatic gesture, signing willing and letting a blade cut him, and so, seemingly saying willing to bleed for the school.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how they interpret it, at least, too. And it's a dramatic gesture, and
it seems pretty
stilling
clear.
The wind, like you would be like, what the fuck is this, dude?
Yeah. That's the one where it would have to be like, they're not seeing things like that. I mean, we have to expect they're not seeing things like this. Maybe perhaps never seen anything like it before.
The way they all react to it, too, it obviously doesn't seem like this is normal behavior, that people do this. And the fact that they're like, everybody gets cut.
Yeah.
And so it doesn't seem like it's like in Celine when she goes through it, she's like smacking the leaves away, and it's like a combat exercise.
Mm-hmm.
It's part of utilizing the K-Tan. And for him, the wind just stilled. You would think they're probably not thinking like he called the name of the wind and stilled the wind himself. They would think like the wind stilled for him or something.
Yeah,
like
chose
that.
him.
Like, yeah.
Well, there's also the thought. I mean, there's a lot of things to interpret from it. One thing that I think is quite significant is he doesn't act as the Adem do, right? Like you said, like it's a combat exercise. Well, he just walks in, walks out, man. Like he walks in, he does the steps, but he doesn't raise his hands, anything like that, right? So he just he doesn't do it as an Adem would do it. He does it his way, but then also does that willfully cutting his hand and showing willing seems to be pretty close to interpretation. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
There's not a lot of different ways to interpret what that really means. So it's pretty tremendous, the choices that Rothfuss made there.
Yeah, it would be visually, it'd be extremely cool. Like this is one of the cooler parts of this book, just this whole description, this whole chapter of him walking in, stepping, dodging, moving side to side, backwards, forwards, just stepping perfectly away from these things, moving like Cheyenne does defensively, not using the K-Tan to slap the leaves away and that kind of thing that Celine does, but just like moving in this omniscient way where he knows exactly where everything's going to fall. And so he's just stepping, letting the leaves fall where they're going to fall and just not being where they're going to hit when they're going to hit. Just
not so it's like not involving himself. It's kind of like, again, it kind of speaks to he's passing through.
Yeah, he's just walking through the empty spaces. And
well, even in a larger sense, Kvothe himself goes to a Dimray, not to change the Adem, not to like, do anything, not to like manipulate the way they do things either. He's passing through, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, and it's kind of in itself, it's speaks to that, symbolically.
That would be impressive enough, but then the stilling the wind in a place that it never stops blowing, and then for him it just stops. Like you would just be like, what the hell just happened?
Yeah. This dude.
Like, who is this? This is, Magic Mike here, man.
Yeah, I mean, Magic Mike. It would definitely be in the sense of like, this dude is very different. This guy is special, right? I mean, there's no misinterpreting that. Like, this fucking dude. Who is this guy? And then, and that's why it's also so important. Next chapter we get. So I hear you have these crazy powers. I got some powers.
I can do a thing or two.
I can do some stuff. I can do some.
I got a guy.
Card tricks.
I got a guy.
Got a guy.
All right, and then we got chapter 124, Secrets and Secrets and Mysteries. And in this chapter, Bichette congratulates him and then brings him with Cheyenne, and they get into a little bit of secrets about what Kvothe has done and some of the knowledge that the Adem have that Kvothe desperately wants.
Yeah, a lot goes on here. She doesn't really just congratulate him. She smacks him around and does something I fucking hate, which is the ear flick.
Well, he should watch how he talks to her.
I don't think that's what it was about.
She was really mad at him, and he overstepped his bounds again, just like he did when she smacked him in the face real hard.
Very different.
That's how I read this situation. A lot of anger, a lot of hostility. It's very intense.
Yeah, I don't think it's like that at all. She's basically she's razzing him.
Yeah,
right? Razzing him, and but that ear flick, man.
It's just one of those like playful things, a little bag tag of your friend. Fun little games you play with friends.
Yeah. She's a rough one, man. This is how she plays around. She's smacking him around. She's flicking his ear.
It would be
fun.
It would be very, very frustrating if like you're with some girl and you're sleeping together all the time, and then she's just constantly just kicking the shit out of you, and she can like flick you in the air or literally beat the living shit out of you, and then there's nothing you can do about it.
Yeah, that'd be a problem for me, man. I don't think I could do that relationship.
I'm not a guy that would be cool with being like physically dominated. It would make me very uncomfortable.
Yes, I agree. That would not work for me.
It was not, some guys are into that. They get turned on by it. I am not one of those guys. I would be very uneasy if I was getting physically dominated by a woman that I was hooking up with. It'd be one thing if it's just like I'm going to like some MMA class, some really good MMA fighter that's a girl is beating my ass. It's one thing,
You're going
I can
in
accept that there's going to be girls that could kick my ass. There's 3.5 billion girls on the planet. I'm sure some of them can kick my ass. But someone I'm in a relationship with, that would be something that would make me very uneasy.
Yeah, you kind of want to be able to relax, right?
Yeah.
I think that's kind of an important part of a relationship.
Except I can relax around guys that could, physically dominate me. Right? That wouldn't be that big of a problem. But I don't know. It's just like the dynamic wouldn't work for me in a relationship.
I think that's probably a fairly normal thing.
Yeah.
I think that's I think the demographic of those that are the other direction that you were describing, guys that like to be dominated, I think is a much smaller demographic.
Bichette
would be my guess.
Bichette would likely have to find someone that she would be comfortable being physically dominated, because it sounds like she's going to have a very slim selection of dudes that could beat her ass. Sounds like there are very few men in the world that could do anything to fuck with her in a physical combat.
Yeah, it seems so. It definitely seems so.
Kvothe would even be worse. Like, Bichette seems like she's kind of Kvothe size or bigger, and like same height, but maybe a little bit sturdier. Kvothe is like comes up to his chest, so it sounds like she's like 5'2" or something. Be like some 5'2", 120-pound girl just laying waste to you. Be like,
I get the impression.
What world am I living in?
I get the impression that oh shit, what's her name? I just drew a blank. Vespa? Fuck.
Bichette.
Vachette, yeah, I get the impression that Vachette's really strong as well, like
Yeah.
very strong. I don't get the impression that Pentha's necessarily strong. She's just extraordinarily formidable. Like, she's
Yeah.
extraordinarily fast, ridiculously dexterous, like in a way that's not even physically possible in our world, from what it
Yeah.
sounds like. So yeah, I mean, either it sounds like you're not going to find a match, someone that can,
I wouldn't be looking for my dating pool within the Adem society.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I don't think
I'd,
so, but
I'd be
it
cool with
seems
being
like
buddies with them. Go out and get a beer and hang out, and I'll even let you guys fight my battles for me. I'm not opposed to that, but it's just long-term relationship. No, I'm not going to be with someone who thinks it's fun to like flick my ear and push me around and like gets mad at me, whoops my ass, be like, nope, this isn't working for me.
Yeah, I'm not signing up for that that relationship. That wouldn't work for me either.
But yeah, but Vachette, held her hand to her chest as if gossiping. And she comes up to him, she's like, get over yourself, you melodramatic ass. You can fool them, but not me. She's like, did you hear what Kvothe brought back from the Sword Tree? The things a barbarian cannot understand, silence and stillness, the heart of a Dimray. What did he offer to Cheyenne? Willingness to bleed for the school. She looked at me, her expression trapped between disgust and amusement. Seriously, it's like you stepped out of a storybook. I gestured gracious, flattering, understated, affectionate acceptance. Bichette reached out and flicked my ear hard with a finger. I love that he's like, no, get out of here. Call me melodramatic. He's like, your whole society is one big dumb show.
I like his comeback on that one and his willingness to be like, yeah, come on, man. But what you just read though, gracious, it was like 7 descriptions in one hand gesture, or like he does like 7
I
hand
think he
gestures
did multiple
quick?
hand gestures, one for gracious, one flattering, understated, affectionate, acceptance. I think it's like a combination or something like that. Because like how would they like you would have one specific gesture for gracious, flattering, understated, affectionate, except like talk about getting into complex territory.
But even still, like just stacking up all these different descriptions of one thing, like has some complexity here, man.
Yeah. Yeah, and he's learned it. Apparently, he's got a much bigger grasp of the language now.
Yeah, but I do like him coming back with like, like, oh come on, like this is your guy's whole world. Like, never mind your interpretation. This is how I
have
interpret
a hidden
your
language, like just that aspect. You have a hidden language. People think you guys hold in your words, and that you use your words as like some burning fire inside you, and that's where your power comes from, because you guys have a bunch of secret mysteries. No one understands anything about your society. You're so insular.
Yeah. It's a reasonable comeback.
Yeah. But yeah, she lets him know that he impressed Cheyenne, and she's like, which is the most important thing, and you did it in such a way that the heads of the other schools won't be able to grumble too much, which is the other most important things. And so then he goes with Cheyenne and Bichette, and they go into like some building to have their talk. And she's like, first she takes him to go see someone to bandage up his hand. She's like, here's the only person I would have tend your hand. And he's like, what of the apothecary? And she says that the apothecary is close friends with Caseret's mother, and that she wouldn't trust her. And that calls back to an earlier chapter when he goes to the apothecary and she turns him away, kicks him out of there. And then you find out just a couple chapters later that it's because it was a friend of Caseret's mom.
Yeah, that was a nice little payoff, because I remember in my mind I was just like, really though, like why? It seemed a little bit over the top. When I read it initially, where it's just like, so it's that thorough, huh? None of these people like trust him, whatever. And then it's like, oh, okay, there's a reason. All right, kind of satisfying to get that, it kind of ties that together.
Yeah, and so
small thing, but still.
Yeah, he's got a lot of those little subtle touches where he ties things together, and he doesn't even do it explicitly. He doesn't point out the fact that he just talked about a handful of chapters before that the apothecary had turned him away.
Mm-hmm.
he doesn't tie those two things together. You got to kind of just do it on your own. So he's got tons of those things in this book, just little subtle things that kind of tie together if you're paying attention. But he goes to see Shane, and she asks him how his hand was. He says, it's fine, it's shallow cut. It's like, Dalen has the smallest stitches I have ever seen. He's quite remarkable. She nodded approval, which that would be a skill you would think that they would be good at, given what they do just for their test. Yeah. They have a test where they expect to need stitches afterwards. It just,
The amount of practice this guy has to have is crazy, right? So
yeah.
But it's interesting, the what did he say, how small the stitches are?
Yeah. So it would leave, very little scar if you got it. It sounds like a better job than the one Simon did to Kvothe, where Mola's like, it looked like someone was trying to spell their name in your arm.
Maybe that's what he was going for,
Yeah.
Maybe it ties into the
he's got a huge
knots.
crush. He's got a huge secret crush on Kvothe. He was trying to mark him.
What's the geez, why am I keep drawing blanks here? The secret, the knot language. The
Yillish.
Yeah, there it is. Yeah, maybe he's doing some Illish knots. We just don't know that about Sim. He's got, secret abilities.
Yeah, I'm telling you, he's got a secret crush on Kvothe. He was trying to get in there, trying to use magic on him.
Illish knots.
But so they start talking, and then he's like, I held up my left hand wrapped in clean white linen. He's like, the hard part will keep this hand idle for 4 days. I already feel as if it were my tongue that were cut, not my hand, which shows how much he's adjusted to this society where he's that dependent on the hand talk now, where when he doesn't have access to it, it's a noticeable loss for him. Not just like, now you guys are going to think I'm weird. He's like, now I feel uncomfortable because I feel like I can't express myself anymore.
Yeah, he's really got immersed in the experience of the world. That at least that would be a sign for sure. Unless he's faking it. Doesn't sound like he's faking it.
Yeah, and then, Shane smiles at him, shows she's, they're developing a comfort level, and she tells him that he performed quite well today. Everyone is speaking of it. I love this part where he's like, I expect the few that saw have better things to speak about, I said modestly. And this dude's Mr. Modest. I mean, that, if you would say one thing about Kvothe that throughout these 2 books is he's a very modest, very humble guy.
Yeah, his false modesty
really shows it here.
His false modesty is pretty clear typically when it comes through.
Yeah. Here he's trying real try hard at trying to be humble here. Like, it's like, oh, I think, alls I did was call the name of the wind. Big deal. Who hasn't done that? It's like,
that's real
fuck out of here, man. You just did one of the hardest things in the history of the world. You know how hard it is. You've done it 3 times in 3 very memorable moments of your life. And you're going to be like, oh, I'm sure they got better things to talk about. It's like, okay, dude.
You just consider if he saw someone do it, even at the university, he'd be floored.
I think when he saw Abenthy did it, it completely changed his life. Yeah. It changed the trajectory of his life, where he's just like, now that's all I want. Learning sympathy is nothing but stupid magic. Don't care. Show me the real shit. And then when he does it, like, oh, it's no big deal. It's just stuff you do. You just call the name of the wind, sometimes. It's just what we do. It's just,
This is what it's usually like when I walk by leaves. This is what always happens. This doesn't happen for you? Weird.
I would expect this to happen every time someone goes through the spinning trees. They step perfectly because they see the pattern of the wind, and then they call the wind. They tell the wind, hey, knock that shit off, and then you just walk through. Doesn't that happen for everybody?
He should have just said that. He just, I do what I do. Just did what I did.
Yeah. That's basically how he approaches it. It's such a ridiculous response to her, like saying that everybody's talking about it. He's, that's no big deal. Everybody does it. But yeah. And then she, her reaction, amused disbelief. That may be true, but those who watch from hiding will doubtless say what they have seen. Celine herself will have already told 100 people, unless I miss my guess. By tomorrow, everyone will expect your stride to shake the ground as if you were Eighth himself come back to visit us.
That's really putting it into context.
Yeah. Yeah, no shit. And then
so he's big dingling around campus these days.
He is, and he's it sounds like, you know, what Pentha tells him, he is gonna have his pick of the litter if he wanted it.
Well, that's
he's no longer a barbarian.
That's a pretty crass way of putting it, wouldn't you say?
They are a very crass people.
Oh, so you're adopting their approach, their perspective. Okay. Fair enough. I'll allow it. How about that?
If they're not offended by it, why are you offended by it for them?
I'm in my mode. I'm growing up. This is me growing up.
Clutching them pearls, man.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then, so he's like, I couldn't think of anything to say, so I kept quiet, a rarity for me. But as I've said, I've been learning. And
there's this humility again.
Fake it. You're a faker.
Yeah, I was going to say, there's this humility again.
Yeah.
This false modesty again.
This is not you. You're not going to be like that. You're as soon as you get to the mayor, you're going to show that you did not learn to keep your mouth shut.
Yeah, no shit, in a huge way.
And a very significant, important point. You're not able to shut your mouth. Yeah.
One of the most important circumstances where you need to shut the fuck up. And same thing, I mean, with Denna, and, you know, that was the other one that comes to mind where it's like, dude, just, you know, chill the fuck out.
It's like,
bro.
I've learned my lesson, but I'm going to forget it in 2 seconds.
Immediately. Well, we just got that too, right? With the two big fucking smack sessions with Vachette, where it's like, oh, okay, yeah, so that was clear, that lesson, and then the next chapter, like, boom, like, didn't learn anything. Like, dude, what the? There's quite a few chapters where it's like, if you could get inside this dude and, you know, basically be his back, right? If you could be and, you know, move his body around like old whatever that guy is,
puppet master.
No, the guy that plays the guitar that you sent on YouTube. That guy.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that.
I don't know his name, so I can't
forgot all
reference
about that. Marcin. Yeah,
whatever
I forgot.
yeah,
Marcin needs. Yeah, Marcin needs his coat needs to assert his dominance here and get control of the situation.
Yeah, these
Slit
moments
and Kvothe
where
run the show.
These are the moments that he's just shaking his head like, God, come on, man, pull it together. Or he's whispering in his ear.
Man, that would be, think of how bad he's like feeling, like being on his back, like just completely exposed to all those leaves flying down.
Man. Imagine
he's the one in complete danger. Like, yeah. Oh man, what a dick move. No wonder he didn't care.
Well, I guess actually when he takes off his shirt, he takes Martine off his back and Sheeran gets whipped.
I guess he would have to, yeah. So that is a pretty brave move.
So in that scene, he just picks Martine up like a baby, puts him over his arm.
That's why he wouldn't let the guy mess with his shirt, and he picked it up himself. Like, get away from that. I'm not having you touch Marcin. Get back on my back.
So it's just Marcin like huddled on the ground.
Yeah. He's just sitting there all curled up, trying to lay flat as possible so no one notices it's another person laying on the ground.
Being.
Everybody's just not acknowledging that it's a full-grown human being that he just pulled off his back and set on the ground. That's the best part of this story is, the realization that there's been a guy clinging to his back the whole time.
Yeah, how that works.
That's why he wears cloaks, to hide him better.
Yeah. Yeah, well, it's effective, you know. Most people just don't see him. You
know? No one got quiet because of the fact that he took the whipping without making a noise. They were all just like, "What's up with the guy you just set on the ground?" I guess, are we not going to talk about this? Is no one talking about this? Am I the only one that's seeing this?
So it's a collective surprise where everybody's awkward silence together.
Everybody's trying to figure out why no one else is talking about it.
I mean, that would create some awkwardness, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, so yeah, him and Marcine, Ed Sheeran and Marcine are sitting there talking to Shayan, and he goes, she brings up, that there's something I've been waiting to speak to you about. And Shane said, guarded curiosity. After Tempe brought you here, he told me the long story of your time together, she said, of your search for the bandits. I nodded. She's like, is it true that you made blood magic to destroy some men, then called lightning to destroy the rest? And I love that Vachette looks at them like, what? What did
Yeah.
you just say? Like looking back and forth, like, all right, what? Hold on. He did what now? Completely unaware. But it's also like, is she unaware that, that type of thing is even possible? Like, is she shocked that such like that this is something she's never seen anybody do this type of thing before? So it'd like to hear that it actually exists would be mind blowing. That Kvothe, the person she's training, would be capable of such a thing would be mind blowing, or is it just that she's surprised that Kvothe is capable of it?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's kind of wild too that the way it comes out, you're like, man, I should have thought about this. At least for me, where it's like, it's not the type of thing I didn't necessarily think of being talked about, but it would make total sense that he would,
Yeah.
right? When he's like trying to sell him to the school in the first place. Like, you don't know what this guy's capable of. Like the amount of power he can wield. It would make sense that Tempe would tell him. But the fact that we're not told that he told him, then why would doesn't occur. There's a lot of things that distract us from thinking about it in the first place.
Yeah.
But when that does come up, it is kind of like, whoa, okay.
I would guess that at least Cheyenne, she doesn't seem like to think that there's an impossibility to being able to do this. Like she seems to accept that blood magic and what Tempe tells him that he tells her that he did. She seems to accept that that's possible. Like she's accepting of the magical ability that it exists and people can do it. So it seems like it would be something that there's people in Adem that are capable of this thing, especially when he gets his name and you see that she's much like a Loden in many respects. And her, when she gives him her name, he calls it towards the way she looks at him and the way he feels is how Loden makes him feel. It seems like there's almost surely naming ability in this society. So again, that further gives evidence towards that there's something magical going on with this society beyond just a natural ability or practice or anything like that. So
well, and also it also feels like they would also be more accepting of the existence of these things, given that they accept the Chandrian are real.
Yeah,
right. They exist instead of everybody else.
Why do they accept that the Chandrian are real? And then that's the question is like, why would they accept that? Have they seen it, or is it just something that they just believe in, like a superstition, and they've just been told that it exists, and so they just accept it without knowledge of it? Doesn't seem like that's the case. It seems like they have firsthand experience with these kind of things, and it seems like that their history goes back a long time. Like their swords, swords seem magical, and I think they probably understand that there is something magic about their swords. They probably understand that their swords are different than other swords.
And it does seem like, well, and their stories are extraordinarily important to them. They keep it alive.
Yeah.
Right. They keep those stories alive and they keep them in their culture, and they emphasize just how important it is when they issue names and swords and all of that. So that also, that in itself adds emphasis to just how important and how real these things are. And like you said, though, like, how else do you explain these swords?
Yeah.
If they're not magical.
Why do they know the Chandrian? Why, they know that their swords go all the way back to before the block of Drazentor. Just the sword that Kvothe has goes back before one of the major battles of the Creation War where Lanre was killed. Like they trace their swords back to that battle. Like, so they could trace things all the way back there, and they have the stories, and they can pass all this stuff down. They know about the magic, and they're accepting that it is something that a person would be capable of. Then you see that the lady seems to have some kind of naming ability similar to a Loden, and their story about the Chandrian and how much they know. They know their names. They know their true names, at least purport to know their true names. It seems like that there's this race of people. It's not just like people that just were nomadic people and they just found a spot to live. They were just normal humans that found a spot. It sounds like that they go all the way back before the Creation War, that the Ruax, and then they ended up here, isolated in their own insular community, and they have all their stories that go back. Got this tree that's got spinning leaves. They seem to move magically. They have crazy abilities. It seems like that this is just an ancient race that's more powerful, more connected to the old magics than, regular people that you would meet like around the mayor or something.
It also really makes sense that they would stay insular too, because it would allow them to continue to hang on to their traditions.
Yeah,
because it does seem to be, at least in so many ways in our world, that when you do have that, I mean, traditions just sort of they kind of weaken over time to some degree, as there's a I don't know what would you call it, but people leaving one area going to another, and then in some ways tradition strengthens because they want to hang on to it, but in others it weakens. People start their own traditions, rather than sticking to the old ways.
but they obviously have a significant amount of ability, but there's just so much to it that points to the fact that this is a very ancient race, that it's just hard to like read this stuff and not accept that this is an ancient race of people that are different than just the regular people in the world. Maybe they have the same biological chemistry or something like that, but they're different in their ability to access the sleeping mind seems to be significantly more. And I think it's probably because of their lineage and where they are located. In similar way to where when Kvothe is there, how he's got better access to the name of the wind than he's ever had before. And he accesses it in a completely different way, in a more controlled way and without the heightened emotion. So it just seems like that's the significant part of his time here. One of the significant parts of his time here is the Adem and because it's not that Rothfuss like tells you specifically all these things. He's just got a lot of implied information about them, or implicit information about them, that if you start pulling pieces away and looking at the picture of like, okay, if this, that means this, and you start doing that with the Adem, then you start piecing together, like, if they were around for the block of Draws and Tor, if there's the Eighth and Wraith happened before that, their swords go back before that, what does all that mean? And that's where you can kind of start tying together what exactly is going on with the Adem.
One of the things that does just kind of bring up a question in my mind also is they're mercenaries for hire that travel throughout the world. If their land is so significant to their powers, how much do they take with them? How much do they lose? You know what I mean?
Well, you would think like Kvothe, when he goes back to the university, it's not like he loses his naming ability. It's strengthened. It's like he got opened up to it.
Yeah.
It's not that he needs this to be by that tree to suck the power from it. It's just more that the tree opens him up to the power to begin with. Like, the power is everywhere, but this is just kind of opening his mind up to the sleeping mind, making that access to the power easier. That's what it seems to do. I mean,
it is a windy place, right? But I wonder though in regards to how it gives them added abilities. I wonder if it's just a great training ground for them to be able to move into that area, which then they can access wherever they are.
I think it's that. I don't think that there's a power source from the tree that they're draining into their body or something like that. I think there's just the sleeping mind, and if you can access it, you have those, you have the ability to see these different powers and use them. But like maybe being by this tree, even if it's just kind of subconsciously, where maybe you're not seeing the name of the wind, but you kind of sense a pattern to things. So you're a little more in tune than you normally would be. I think it probably makes that access a little easier, that it opens your mind up a little bit. Not necessarily that it's you're draining power from it, and if you're close to it you have more power. The further away you get from it you have less power. I don't think that's the case at all, but I do think that it opens your mind up to the ability that the sleeping mind is the power. And I think that just these kind of areas open you up to the sleeping mind better.
It's sort of like that courtyard, the Hall of the Wind or whatever.
Yeah, or even like the intense emotions opened him up to the power in a different way. I think there's just different things that open your mind up to it, and I think they just are in a prime spot for that.
So he's just bipolar and hallucinates.
Yep, that's exactly what I said. So yeah, then she goes to him, "You're powerful then. I had never thought of it in those terms before." He's like, "I have some power, others are more powerful." She asks him if that's why you're here, to gain power. And he's like, "No, I came here because I'm out of curiosity. I like knowing things." She's like, "Knowing's a type of power." It's like, "Tempe told me there was a Renta among the bandits as their leader." And he asked what a Renta is. And it's like, "A bad thing, a man who's more than a man, yet less than a man." It's like, "A demon?" She's like, "No, not a demon. There are no such things as demon. Your priest tells stories of demons to frighten you," which I love because that's the kind of response that Kvothe would give to her. But because I love the fact that he is saying demon, not thinking that it's an actual demon, but thinking that that's what her interpretation is. Yeah. And then she's like, no, demons don't exist.
And he's like, all right, I'm in the right place. Okay.
Yeah. And then so, I felt hope rising within me. "I've also heard them called the Chandrian," I said. Shane nodded. "I've heard this too, but Renta is a better word." Shane gave me a long look and fell back into Ademic. "Given what Tempe has told me of your reaction, I think that you have met such one before." And I like that I like that part because I'm curious whether Renta specifically translates to Chandrian. The way she they talk about it there makes it seem like Renta does translate to Chandrian, that they're equivalent, or it's at least that every Chandrian is a Renta. It might not necessarily be that every Renta is a Chandrian, but it seems like that's likely the case, that they're interchangeable terms for the Adem.
Well, it does seem like to some degree they're synonymous, but the fact that she says it's a better word does suggest it's more
precise.
It's more precisely articulate to what she's trying to say, right?
Yeah.
Which maybe that would suggest, like you were just mentioning, Chandrian would be of the 7, Renta would be, it's not just 7, it's a larger category that she's trying to describe, of maybe immortals that are in the world that are like men but not men, however she says it there.
Yeah, it could be. I mean, or it could be like the Rena flower is by the Kvothe, so Renta could be like someone influenced by the Kvothe or something like that. Maybe she would see Kvothe as Renta if she knew his what happened to him in the Fae. And so it could be things along those lines. I mean, it could just be like a powerful person that's been sent out, like an arrow in the dark to fuck shit up.
That'd be an interesting thing to consider, that everyone that is on the Chandrian side are all people that talk to Kvothe.
Or like someone who's been bitten by the Kvothe, because she looks and sees if there's any bite marks on him and can't find any. So maybe like a Renta is someone who's actually been bit by the Kvothe. But there's something to it, because there's so much talk about the Renta flower, the Rentas. There's the skin dancer who asks him something about, sounds like something like Celatos. Are you with Celatos or are you with the Chandrian? He uses a word like Renta, or he might even say specifically Renta. But there's some significance to that word.
What's that again?
More than we really understand yet.
What was that again? Where somebody arguing with Celatos?
The skin dancer, when he's speaking to him in like whatever language he's using, he asks Kvothe, and the words he uses, it sounds like something like, are you with Celatos or are you with the Chandrian? Because he says like Renta or Rente or something like that.
Huh.
And
That's
there's question marks behind it. You know, we talked about it in that episode when that stuff came up. But there's definitely something he was asking him there, and it sounds like he's asking him, which side are you on? You know, who are you with? And
so it's kind of like the skin dancer saw.
Are you with the Amir? Are you with the Chandrian? Are you with Celatos? Are you with Haliax? Are you with, you know, this group or that group? Whatever it sounded like he's asking, are you with this group or are you with that group?
I mean, that's the big question, right? That we're all asking.
Yeah. But the fact that he uses a word like Renta, or might even use specifically Renta, I mean, I think that he asks about that is significant in showing what the skin dancer is there for. I think if we understood exactly what he asked him, we would have a much better idea of what that skin dancer was after, who he's working for.
Mm.
But
that's interesting.
She asks him, will you use these things with purpose? He's like, yes. What purpose? To kill him. Such things are not easily killed. I nodded. Will you use what Tempe has taught you? I will use all things to that purpose, I said unconsciously. I unconsciously began to gesture absolute, but the bandage on my hand stopped me. I frowned at it. That is good, Shane said. Your Katan will not be good enough. It is poor for one as old as you are. Good for a barbarian, good for one with as little training as you've had, but still poor overall. And Shay and I have a great desire to know more of these Renta. She was quiet for a long time and said, I'll consider this. Such things are not spoken of lightly. And then he lets it go. He wanted to press her more on it. He thinks about, if I was in my society, I would needle it out of the person. I would get that information. But here, the better move is to be quiet and let them think it over and come to their own conclusion, and then they'll bring it to me.
Yeah, it goes back to he's learning.
But
and also, like you mentioned about the hand talk, I mean, there he was unconsciously going to signal something. So that says a lot about how integrated he's become, how much he's taken this on.
He's getting used to being there. And then I love I was saying, Shane continued, reluctant confession, your Katan is poor, but were you to train yourself in a proper fashion for a year, you would be Tempe's equal. You flatter me. I do not. I tell you your weaknesses.
They really shit on Tempe a lot.
Tempe's always taking jabs from these people when he's not around to defend himself. He's always taking uppercuts. But yeah, and she's like, you learn quickly that leads to rash behavior, and rashness is not of the Lothani. Shed is not alone in thinking there's something troubling about your spirit. And she stares at him for a minute, and then she's, kind of smile comes to her. She gives a little shrug. She's like, still, whimsically musing, if ever I've met someone without a single shadow of their heart, it was surely a child too young for speaking. But here's the thing. Everybody sees this shadow on Kvothe. Everybody knows it's dangerous to teach him. They all specifically mention that it's dangerous to teach him. At least like a Loden and, Shane here. These people, they kind of seem to have an understanding of the deeper turnings of the world. They sense that there's something dangerous about Kvothe, but then they all teach him.
Yeah.
It's too charismatic.
I mean, well, Abinthy has a realization and then pulls back, right?
Yeah.
And then cuts out.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right. I mean, that's a really interesting motif that goes throughout. I wondered that also. So when the old lady names him, when she looks into him for a second, he thinks he sees something. He thinks he sees a reaction in her that's like, not like befuddlement, but like she was disturbed. She saw something that disturbed her, but she still names him.
Yeah.
And then also the question that comes up also from, and I'm only mentioning these things because it ties in the same line in my mind, where also Vachette's reaction is kind of like, she wonders about the name, where she's like, Maedra, that's what gets her, that's what gets her hit, is because she's like, it seems like she doesn't understand. It seems like the name doesn't fit in her mind. So something odd's going on there, at least as far as I can tell.
Yeah. Well, I don't necessarily think it is. She thinks like the name that he's given doesn't fit. I think it seems ominous to her. Like it's a it's not the kind of name you want to be given. It's like, if you're found out that, your name was Darth Vader, be like, what? That's pretty ominous. That's not a good sign. If your true name is, the name of disaster, or like, finding out your true name is Kvothe, which means disaster. That would be ominous. So it's that kind of, I think it's more that kind of thing, is like that word Maedra, I think has an ominous tone to it for them.
Yeah, that's, well, the prologues are ominous, man.
Especially when like he talks about like, it means like the broken tree or something like that. Like for them, with how much importance they put on the sword tree, that would be an ominous word.
Well, and also it sounds like, I mean, anything broken, you're splitting something of significance. You don't fit, right? Like it's, I mean, that again reminds us this is a fucking tragedy, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, all those things, they're there for a reason.
Yeah.
Right. That like any type of, and these are very important moments, like huge moments, as we know how important name is and all these things. So there's definitely significance in all of it. But I even like the way that's delivered. I know I'm kind of jumping ahead, but it fits with the subject, where it's important in the sense also of how in Kavoth's mind, it's like he doesn't want to believe it. Like that happens quite often, where there's certain things where he wants to believe this, but he tells the truth. That's one of the things that when people talk about him being an unreliable narrator, well, he tells the hard truths, man. There's many times where he says, I wish I could say this, but that wouldn't be true.
Yeah.
Well, if he was an unreliable narrator, he'd just say, yeah, I hit every last second shot there is. Boom. I'm just nailing it.
I mean, it doesn't make a lot of sense for the story to add in the fact that he's lying. It just doesn't. I mean, like
why would it be? Like, why would he admit it's a tragedy from the beginning?
I mean, and also like, is he going to go at the end of the story and start telling you when he was lying and when he was telling the truth? Because it's a first person narrative. We're in his head. Who's going to tell us that all these stories were bullshit? Which ones were bullshit?
The realities. Yeah.
It just like, it's so much. Like, it creates so much work for Rothfuss that it just doesn't make any sense to add in. Like, why would you do that to yourself? Like, in a first-person narrative, it's important. It's pretty important that you can rely that the first person is not lying to you, is not making up bullshit to trick you. Because otherwise, how are you going to know whether any of it was true?
Yeah, well, and allowing room for nuance, and Rothfuss has done that by repeatedly saying that to make a story real, you bend the truth to some degree, but the truth is always more powerful than the story. And when you tell the truth, it seems unreasonably unbelievable, right?
But in here, I don't even think he's doing that, because he tells like, when he tells the story, he says like, okay, here's the story that this is the truth, but what I told these people is different because they wouldn't have believed the truth. I mean, so he's like going out of the way to differentiate when he does that.
Well, that's my point.
When he does that.
But my point in bringing that up is Rothfuss is very smart to bring that up because it lends more elegance to the story in itself.
Yeah.
Because it's kind of quoting on the idea of an unreliable narrator and how there's room for nuance within the story itself, and it's like a motif that gets used throughout. Like, it comes from his father originally, and then it comes yet again, and he talks about how many times a story or a lie is easier than the truth. The truth is more painful. Reliving the truth is more painful. This is not a fun story. I'm gonna fucking this is gonna send me through hell just to tell it.
That is one of the things that what you're talking about is what people would point to give evidence that the story could be a lie, is because he says
but that's
good story is not true. Yeah, I agree. It is 100%. I mean, it's because we've talked about it. Yeah, it's because the fact that it's a first person narrative, it just makes it very hard for you to complete the story if you don't even, you come to get to the end and you don't know what was bullshit and what was true. That significantly hurts, negatively impacts the first two books and the enjoyment of rereading them.
Yeah,
it's tough to go. You get to the end of the series, and then you're rereading the books, and you're like, well, what actually happened here? Like, we found out that he was lying. Like, so when was he telling the truth? When was he lying? Like, we're supposed to just guess because we would have no way of ever knowing.
Yeah, this would fall on the end of like it slaps in the face of Rothfuss's artistry, and it's basically saying he falls short as a writer, which I would rather believe it's good because I've enjoyed it so far. I would rather hold it up to what he's doing is a great piece of work.
It'd be one thing like in a movie where you could show like, here's, in just little quick scenes, flashback scenes where you show what really happened or the sleight of hand that was done that misled you. You can kind of reveal those things, kind of like how they do in Sixth Sense. When they got the big reveal, then you go through and you see it from the other perspective, and then you're like, oh shit, okay, yeah. And so you can do those kind of things in those kind of situations because you can have the reveal. Here, you can't reveal something when you've already had 1,400 pages or 1,600 pages, however many it is. Like, how are you going to reveal all these stories? He's told a shit ton of stories.
Yeah.
So, like, if you make him a liar at that point, then you're not going to know whether any of it is true. And then it's like, why am I reading this? I don't even know what happened.
That's really that. Talk about not sticking the landing.
Yeah. But, and so he's, they're talking about that. And then I love the fact that when they're like, okay, let's head out of here and go get your name. He's like, none of us has spoken since we left the school. I didn't know what was about to happen, but it didn't seem proper to ask. It would have seemed irreverent, like a groom blurting out, what comes next? Halfway through his own wedding. I love that. Like, if I ever get married, I want to do that now. Like, every time I hear that, I'm like, I want to do that so bad. And I wish at some wedding, I hate going to weddings, but I wish that if I go to a wedding, that the groom does that halfway through the ceremony or halfway through some part of it, because it will crack me the fuck up.
He's just constantly going, let's go. Come on. Let's go. What's up?
Just like, or even just do it like you're completely like, what's next? What's next? What happens
flabbergasted
now?
By everything.
Oh my God, that's amazing.
It jumps out and listening to the audible. What's next? Like the way he yells it, it's like, what the fuck?
Yeah, it'd be hilarious. Just the idea of doing it is just, it's funny. The image of doing it is funny. But yeah, and then he's like, they come in, they see the woman. He's like a woman sat at a low table copying something from one book into another. Her hair was white, her face wrinkled as an old apple. Then he realizes, like, shit, this is the first time I've seen anybody reading or writing the whole time in heart or in hair. But so obviously most of their storytelling is getting past word of mouth. They're not just reading books and walking around with books. He's not seen a single person reading or writing the entire time he's there. So that's not something that is a significant part of their culture.
When in these rooms he's been in, there's no books. Right, there's no library, it seems, in their world either. So, yeah,
but they seem like they got information that they want kept. They want written down. They want it to be able to pass for accuracy, probably. Mm-hmm. But that seems more information that they're preserving for their own history, but they're not trying to have it get out there that other people can read it. It seems like they don't like. It's not books that Kvothe's walking upon where you can read about their culture. Like, all that shit seems to be hidden away. And so it seems like more of we want to preserve this for ourselves, but we don't want this information to get out into the world. So these books never leave this room.
Yeah, they're extraordinarily secretive.
Yeah.
I mean, like you said, they have a secret language.
Yeah.
Man, like they go into other areas.
The way they talk about the Katan, I mean, they use hidden code to describe all the movements. And so even that.
And someone like Kvothe, who's so interested and so well read, knows virtually nothing except what he learns from Tempe about the Adem, and then coming here, he still didn't know anything, except for what he learned from Tempe. That was it. He was still very much befuddled by much of it. Yeah,
and then we are come for a name, Magwin, Shane said. Polite, formal entreaty. A name? Magwin asked, puzzled. She looked from Shane to Vachette, then her eyes moved to where I stood stood behind them to my bright red hair and my bandaged hand. Ah, she said, growing suddenly somber. And she has him come over, and she's like looking him up and down. And I like that she's like, I would hear you say something, she said, still looking intently at my hand. As you will, honored shaper of names. It's like, is this dude mocking me?
Well, I think it's important if you're going to read her parts, you do it in the right voice. Or
Yeah.
Hello.
Yeah, he has a distinctive old lady voice.
It's pretty funny. It's pretty funny. But yeah, you're right. You're just like, does he mock me?
Yeah. It's like,
it sounds like a bird, dude. Like
an
old bird.
He's like, Denna, she's got the voice that Denna would say is like, sounds like it's coming out of a cat's asshole.
I was going to say, what's his face? R.I.P. Jafar's bird.
Yeah. Starts cawing after everything he says. Does he mock me? Caw. But yeah, and then he says, her eyes were like Elodin's, not in any of the details. Elodin's eyes were green, sharp, and mocking. Magwin's were the familiar Adem gray, slightly watery and red around the edges. No, the similarity was in how she looked at me. Elodin was the only other person I had met who could look at you like that, as if you were a book he was idly thumbing through. So, I mean, that's got to be pointing to the fact that she's a namer. She's got power. This is not she's not just doing a palm reading. The fact that he compares it to what Elodin can do is too significant.
I mean, it seems quite clear. They're also going to her for a name.
Yeah.
I mean, it seems quite clear. And that I mean, again, that's saying a lot about their culture, that they have a namer and they have someone who's keeping stories. And it's saying a lot about, there's just so much that's so secretive, man. Like they use basically naming, they use the sleeping mind. They don't talk about it.
They have a secret library. What the hell? What is she copying? What are these books?
Yeah.
What is all this information you got?
Yeah. Where is it?
Yeah. Can't just be the sword book. It's got to be more than just that sword book.
Well, they got all those, there's all these doors in that room, right? That all go back into the hill. I'm just imagining they're all just like hidden back there or something. That's what it seems. I don't know. Everything's under lock and key.
But yeah, so she looks at him just like, when Magman met my eyes for the first time, it felt like all the air had been sucked out of me. For the barest of moments, I thought she might be startled by what she saw, but that was probably just my anxiety. I'd come to the edge of disaster too often lately, and despite how well my recent tests had gone, part of me was still waiting for the other shoe to drop. I think it's interesting, too, that he describes the situation as the edge of disaster, given that the name he ends up taking, Coat, means disaster. And when she looked at him, he said, seemed like she was startled for a moment when she looked at him. And then when she gives him the name Maedra, Fichette's like, Maedra? Said with a hint of dismay in her voice. She might have said more, but Shane reached out and cuffed her sharply on the side of the head. I like when she does that, Kvothe laughs, and then they just both glare at him.
Yeah, it's pretty funny. He's just basically laughing because she's been kicking the shit out of him. It's like, aha, look, you also there's someone that beats you up. Nice. I've been waiting for this moment.
Flicker in the air.
Yeah, and they basically give him the look of, grow the fuck up.
Yeah.
You're embarrassing me.
But yeah, and then Magwin turned to look at me. She didn't seem upset. Do you laugh at the name I have given you? Never, Magwin, I said, trying my best to gesture respect with my bandaged hand. Names are important things. It's like, what does a barbarian know of names? And I mean, they know names they talk about names in the same way namers talk about names, not in the, we call you a different calling name. They talk about it like names, significant names. And then she goes like, he's like, some, and then she goes, far away, I've made a study of such things. I know more than many, but still only just a little. And she looks at him for a long time, and she's like, then you will know you should not speak your new name to anyone. It is a private thing and dangerous to share. That is something a namer would say, not someone who doesn't know anything about naming.
That sounds like a Elodin again.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, Loden's the only other person that says that to him. Yeah.
Yeah, and immediately brings to mind. I mean, it brings to mind the whole thing with Fella. It's like, wait, she changed her name? You changed your name? Like that whole thing, that interchange. Yeah.
Yeah, and Megwin looked satisfied at this and settled back onto her chair, opening a book. Bichette, my little rabbit, you should come and visit me soon. I will, grandmother. Thank you, Megwin, Shane said, deferential gratitude. The old woman nodded a distracted dismissal, and Shane led us from the cave. And then I like the way it ends is hilarious, because he goes back to Vichette's place, and they're hanging out, and it's like, how's it feel to be no longer a barbarian? Slightly, about the same. Slightly drunker. Find out he went to a party with Kvothe.
Yeah.
And I love that he's like, bringing up, first he brings up to Bichette about the Chandrian. He's like, hey, I don't think I've made my point clear. I really want to know about the Chandrian, and I don't know if I made that clear enough. And it's like, can you talk to Cheyenne and make it expressly clear? And then so she assures him that she will. And so he drops the subject, and then he's like, tonight, Kvothe told me that she thought I had a fine anger and that she'd like to share it with me. Bichette chuckled. That didn't take very long. What happened? And then he goes, she reminded me that Adem do not consider physical contact particularly intimate. Bichette's smile grew practically lecherous. Grabbed hold of you, did she? It's like, I moved quickly than I did a month ago. Nah, not quick enough to get away from Kvothe.
So she grabbed for the old unit, sounds like.
Yeah.
She went right for it.
Yeah.
I
don't know if that was what she did, but like that's something you could see, the way they talk about sex and everything. You could see an Adem woman being that aggressive and just like walking up and just yank. But, she goes, I Dutch move quickly enough to keep away from Kvothe. All she is looking for is sex play. There's no harm in it. That is why I was asking you, I said slowly, to see if there's any harm in it. Bichette raised an eyebrow at the same time, gesturing vague puzzlement. Kvothe is quite lovely, I said carefully. However, you and I have been intimate. And then she just laughs at him, which is hilarious. She's like, what you mean is we've been sexual. The intimacy between a teacher and a student is greater by far than that. Just crazy. Yeah, my sensei is not more intimate to me than, my girlfriend. Those would be vastly different experiences as far as intimacy.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, there's like a work element, right? There's like an element where it's like either like you said, a sensei is like a teacher, almost like a manager, an advisor at work or in school or something. There's an intimacy in terms of knowledge, skill. There's a mutual respect in terms of we're helping one another, right? I'm learning from you. All that is, yes, there's intimacy involved in that. But spitting in someone's mouth, it's very different. It's a different level of intimacy.
Yeah, I would not be cool with someone spitting in my mouth. It's one thing to like kiss with someone, but if someone spit in my mouth, that's taking it to a whole nother level.
Well, you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I'm saying swapping, spit.
Yeah,
or
swap
like
and spit.
My mother used to say necking, which I always thought was the weirdest thing.
Neck? I love rubbing my neck against a girl's neck. That's one of my favorite things.
When I hear that, what I do picture, your favorite, the old movies, the black and white movies where people would be getting, randy with each other. They were getting kind of sexual, and they basically rub faces. Like, is this how people made out in the 50s? Where they're rubbing their faces together?
I picture like you doing like kind of like a Pac-Man thing with your neck, where you're like moving your head down towards your ear, towards your shoulder. And then like she's got her neck and she's doing it, and you're kind of like pinching your necks against each other and you're necking.
That's what it is?
See, like that? You doing that kind of move? Like kind of like the, what's that fucking Night at the Roxbury where they're doing that? But then a girl's doing it, like you're angling it, so your necks are like squishing up against each other.
So you're getting friction between the necks.
Yeah.
That's what you're going for?
So hot.
Oh, is that how you get a hickey?
Yeah. Yeah, burn each other's necks with your neck.
It's a neck burn.
Yeah. It's kind of like an Indian burn, except for it's all torque in your neck.
So maybe that's what necking was, where it's like somebody saw a hickey, so they're like,
yeah.
oh,
So now
necks.
you can see that it's something that's very hot and sexual, and not as weird as you had thought it was previously.
Sounds intimate. I'll give you that. Sounds really intimate.
Very intimate. Oh man, but yeah, and then so she's just like, I'd forgotten what it's like with you barbarians. It has been many years since I had to explain such things to my poet king. So she doesn't say like, he got it. She's just like, I've had to say these things to my poet king before.
She eventually says, my poet king was the same way. It took him a long, miserable time before he realized the truth of things.
Yeah, and it doesn't sound like he picks up that, sex sounds like he was jealous that Vachette was having sex with other people, and then he just finally gave up.
I think what he gave into was she was continuously taking over him. She was using him like a pommel horse, and he eventually
that's it.
He eventually was like, you know what? It's fine. Just go ahead.
Yeah. Constantly getting completely emasculated, and just like eventually like, it's not that bad, I guess.
I just have it. It's fine.
Yeah.
I'm okay.
It suffices.
I will suffice.
Yeah.
And he just started wearing a shirt, walking around that says "I suffice." He just really owned it,
It's like, just don't do this in front of people. Like, you're gonna make me look like a freaking fool. I can't run a kingdom if you're just throwing me to the ground anytime you want it.
So now I'm loving this. Now I'm envisioning the guy being like, "Oh yes, I'm so into this. Oh yeah, right now in public, yeah. This is so great." Yeah. He's like half-heartedly acting like he's into it.
You've convinced me. Your way is the right way. What was I thinking? How could I ever have thought this would be awkward?
So eventually he has to make himself less attractive to her. He has to find ways to do that.
I don't think that's going to deter Vachette. I don't know. I don't know how, I don't know. I guess she does talk about how Kvothe's got an attractive face. So maybe that is an important part of it. Maybe, probably just stop taking baths. That seems like that would really turn off the Adem. Like, if you wanted to turn off the spout, just don't take a bath for a few days.
Yeah, I mean, that's what the Poet King ended up doing. He just became disgusting, and then she left.
Vachette seems like she'd be fun, like, as just like a little fun time partner. I would not want to date her, but just like a little fun fling, like, she seems like she'd be all right.
She does seem like she'd be fun, but I like looking at her in this light. Yeah, she's just super dominant. Yeah, at all times, and totally. Well,
I kind of picture that's how I picture. I don't picture Vachette so much like that. I picture Hespa like that, like just completely dominating Dedan and emasculating him. And
that's what ends up happening. Yeah,
yeah, I see that as like their kind of dynamic where he's now become the dominated figure.
It's so perfect. It's so perfect for his character arc because he's constantly like the loud gesturing. I have to assert control, which is like that great example of someone who is like, I'm in charge here, making it very clear they're not in charge because they're trying so hard to assert it.
Walking down the street like he's like trying to not hold her hands. Give me your hand. Damn it. I hate this. I hate holding hands.
No, but then eventually he becomes like the king, where he's like, I love this. I love you. Yeah. This is great.
But yeah, and then so, they have their back and forth on it. And I love that aspect of it where it's like, it's not a romantic thing. She's like, of course it's intimate. Anything that brings two people close together is intimate. Conversation, a kiss, a whisper, even fighting is intimate. But we are not strange about our sex. We do not feel shame about it. We do not feel it is important to keep someone else's sex all to ourselves, like a miser hoarding gold. More than any other, the strangeness in your thinking sets you barbarians apart. But again, they don't seem to have, there's not a bunch of STDs floating around their society, and they don't think men can impregnate you. take those two things away from people, and sex becomes
Very different.
a different experience.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, it does
taking away significant risk, and there's inherent risk in sex with us. So it's different.
It's interesting to say shame, because there is that just in nudity itself. They don't have that, right? But yeah, you also take away pregnancy and STDs. It's it all of a sudden it becomes free love, right? It's hippie culture all over. So they're just living in the 60s, man.
Yeah.
It's the late 60s here.
That's what they're doing. Peace and love.
Well, not really peace.
No. Violence and love.
Controlled
physical violence, control, dominance, and love.
Yeah, pretty much. They're all about so they're just a bunch of dominatrix is basically what they're filled with.
Yeah. They were 60s mixed with dominatrix thing.
So it's like I'm picturing like a steampunk version of Woodstock. There you go.
The whole thing. I love that, and then but what of romance then? I asked slightly indignant. What of love? Fichette laughed again, hilarious. Then loud and long and vastly amused. Half a Harriet must have heard it and echoed back to us from the distant hills. You barbarians, she said, wiping moisture from her eyes. I'd forgotten how backward you are. My poet king was the same way. Took him a long, miserable time before he realized the truth of things. There's a great deal of difference between a penis and a heart. Yeah, I know that, but there's also a great deal of difference between throwing someone on the ground and tripping them and kicking them and sticking your wiener inside of someone.
Yeah, there's this strange blurred existence in their world where it's like, so they're not relationships, which is the interesting thing is we don't really see them.
Oh, no, the other hilarious part, she doesn't describe it like brushing teeth when he asks her that. I forgot, like, when I read this.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
She goes, I hesitated for a moment. Out of curiosity, I said, how many others have you been with since we have been together? Bichette seemed surprised by the question. She pursed her mouth and looked up at the sky for a long moment before shrugging. How many people have I spoken with since then? How many have I sparred with? How many times have I eaten or practiced my K-tan? Who counts such things? I love that we've been saying, like, how many times have I brushed my teeth? And she never mentions that.
Yeah.
She never once mentioned. I don't even know if they mentioned brushing teeth once in either book.
Actually, I was about to say I'm fairly certain they don't, but I don't know. But actually, I don't think they do.
But I wonder where we came up with that. I wonder if we were mocking. We were talking about this once, mocking it in the sense of like just making a joke, like how many times have I brushed my teeth?
Yeah.
And then we just adopted that as what she actually says. But yeah, we've been saying that for many, many episodes, talking about her brushing teeth. And then I get here and I was like, she didn't even talk about brushing her teeth.
The fact that she's like, I don't know how many people I've talked to. It's like,
yeah,
you're having that much sex? I mean, come on, man.
Like, I know how many people I talked to today. I mean, I'm certain of those things.
Well, one thing you a lot of times aren't certain about is how many meals you've eaten. But if you stop to think about it, it's not that difficult to think about how many times you've eaten in a day. The idea that you can forget how many people you had sex with in a day, that's a little bit nuts.
I could give a very good estimate of how many meals I've eaten in a month. I would be very close. I bet you I would be within a few meals because I know my pattern.
Yeah, I was about to say, I said that's a little bit crazy. No, that's absolutely insane that you can't think how many times you've had sex, within a day or a week.
Yeah.
Like, wow, who counts such things? Well, if you tried, could you do it?
Yeah. I mean, if I'm eating sometimes I eat 13 meals in a day and shit like that. And it's just 13 one day, 10 another, 15 another. Yeah, I might start losing track. I'm eating a shit ton though. That would be the thing I would be coming away with in that scenario is like, man, I eat a lot. And that's what it sounds like you're saying with sex. It's like, I have so much sex that it's impossible to remember.
So like, well, when do you have time for anything else?
Yeah.
She's having this much.
I'm training with you constantly. Would you like immediately go sprint to dudes and just line them up? Like, get out on the ground, man.
I only have so much time. Let's go.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
going
that's
going from one to the
strange.
next. It's like there's the idea of like I can't remember, so preposterous. Like, what are you talking about? You don't even have a guess?
Well, and again, I guess that goes to we don't have shame and we don't put this on a pedestal, but still,
I don't have
like,
shame about how many times I've eaten. I still know how many times I've eaten.
yeah, yeah, especially in their world because they're eating in a cafeteria.
Yeah. You
They're not
eat
just walking to a
3
fridge in their
square meals a
room.
day. Like, so 3 times however many. Like, how many times have I eaten? Like, 3 times. How many days? What are we talking about? This is pretty easy to calculate.
Yeah, that's nuts. That's like you're having sex every 2-3 hours.
Yeah.
Like it's just happening, and then some days you might not, and then other days you will, and then other days you'll do more. Like, sounds like you're wearing yourself out.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a lot. That's a lot of sex she's having.
So that's another question about how biologically they work in this world. Does friction not wear the skin down? Not get any soreness? Like, because I get sore after so much. I mean, Jesus.
Their main product besides their fighting skill is lubricant.
Like some natural. I don't know how. I don't know where it is in their world, but they have a river of KY jelly.
Yeah.
Something.
They got that hidden back there with the secret books.
Just some spring. It's a spring of Vaseline is what they have.
Like, don't tell the barbarians. Like, they have no idea how we can just keep going forever and ever.
It's a wild world they're living in.
It's so hilarious to me, just their nonchalance with it. Like, that is one of the parts that always sticks out to me so much, is just how nonchalant she is with it, to the point of I have no idea how many times I've had sex.
It's a nonchalance to an extreme
recent amount
level,
of time. Yeah.
To an extreme level where it's like you'd have to emphasize not caring.
Yeah.
Or like the flippance. I don't know. I don't know how that line gets blurred. It's pretty wild.
It definitely sets them up as a very distinct, different culture. That stands out so much that it sets them significantly apart.
Well, so that's what I was gonna mention a moment ago. So there's no examples of a couple. I mean, they mention a couple arguing that one time where it's like,
well, they have
you
families,
can see 2 people arguing.
like, yeah, they have families, but I mean, it doesn't seem like they have, like, mother. This is your mother. This
like
is your
there's no
father.
nuclear.
Like, yeah, it's not a nuclear family, but I think they have, like, if we love each other or whatever, we stay together. They just wouldn't view that we're having children together or anything. Yeah, but I'm like not that. And it doesn't seem like they would be monogamous. Like, it seems like they would be perfectly fine. Well, she talks about love, and and they talk about, like, you go and play for a family, and we have our intimate family setting. So they do talk about family.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
but it's not. It's not in the sense of like the mom, dad, single family that's it. They're monogamous. They got their kids and all that. It's different dynamic.
Well, yeah, there's definitely no monogamy. It sounds like sounds like there's no reason for it.
To the point where they think, like, if monogamy would be weird, like you're a miser hoarding gold.
Yeah. Like, this is strange. Why do you act this way?
Yeah.
I wonder how much sex Magwin.
Why aren't you sharing your genitals with everybody else, you weirdo?
Yeah, that's what I'm getting. I mean, I know this maybe sounds like a weird question, but let's go extreme. How much sex is Magwin having? Yeah. Is it so much you can't count? Like, is that what's going on for everybody? Like,
oh god, he could have really grossed it up. Just have her be completely perverted, sexual, just constantly talking to Kvothe about it. Like, Kavoth's trying to read the sword book, and she's sitting there taking breaks, and he can just hear her getting railed in the back. Jesus. It's making him very uncomfortable. Like, what is this? Why is she doing this to me?
It sounds like she'd be railing somebody, not the other way around. It seems like that's how it works in their world. And Kvothe, Yeah, so I like the idea that she'd be constantly coming on to Kvothe, so he's getting all distracted. He can't memorize this shit.
It's like the scene in what is that movie? The bowling movie, Kingpin, with the girl that
Dennis Quaid and
yeah, when he has sex with his landlord because he can't pay her rent. Yeah.
Yeah.
Shows him like afterwards, he's like vomiting in the bathroom.
Jesus, I forgot about how crazy that movie is.
That's a legendary comedy.
Yeah, it's pretty great. You got Woody Harrelson and Bill Murray.
Yeah,
that Bill Murray character is so great. Yeah, I'll have to check that one out again.
But yeah, so next week we will get into, he will get his sword, and then we might, I don't know how far we'll get, but probably like get into him fighting Kvothe and finishing up his last test with the Adem.
Right on.
Tempe will come back. Tempe will make a little brief appearance.
He's looked at in a different light at this point, that's for sure.
Yeah, a little punk.
He's like a little mascot. He's like a little mascot.
Yeah. A weak idiot. A weak dummy.
They make it sound like Celine is more. It's like, you know what I'm saying? Like she's almost on a higher rung. They almost make it sound like that.
It's like, well, he's better, but like he's some scrub and she's like the up and coming superstar that's going to be the dominant force in the league. And he's like some guy riding the pine, 12th man on the team.
She's coming in banging balls.
But he goes those rec leagues and he just dominates when he plays in those rec leagues.
Yeah, when he leaves. When he goes out on the road. He
stops playing in the NBA and he just goes and plays some scrubs. He dominates the scrubs.
Yeah. He's playing playground games. Yeah. It's a good comparison.
But yeah, so that'll wrap up that episode. We will be back next week. Peace out.
Yep.